Chapter 26:14. The black chi naturally wouldn't listen to Ling Han, and continued to drift towards him. Ling Han raised his right fist and punched at the black chi. Hong! The punch passed, and the black chi all fluttered, dissipated and scattered, but immediately fused again, and it was no longer a dozen scattered strands, but all fused together. Strangely, it was clearly a dozen strands of black chi fused, but it didn't become thicker, as if it had been heavily injured by Ling Han's punch. But Ling Han knew that it wasn't that the black chi was injured by his attack, but that it had become more refined. The black chi surged, and like a spirit snake, it burrowed towards Ling Han. Ling Han drew his sword. Shua! The divine demon sword stabbed at the black chi. The black chi had an obvious dodging movement, but Ling Han's sword was too fast, so how could it dodge? Pung! The sword pierced, and the black chi instantly scattered again, but after turning into smoke, it quickly fused together again, once again turning into a black spirit snake, and continued to coil around Ling Han. Yet Ling Han showed a smile. This time, he did something useless, but he sharply detected that the black chi's density was slightly thinner. Although it was only slightly thinner, Ling Han continued to strike with his sword. Shwa shwa shwa. This time, he didn't wait for the black chi to gather again. The divine demon sword slashed repeatedly, continuously shattering the black chi, and in this process, the black chi also slowly faded. After about a dozen breaths, the black chi finally completely faded, and could no longer be seen. The divine demon sword was a celestial tool, after all, and its destructive power far surpassed Ling Han's. However, if the people here saw Ling Han's waste, they would definitely go mad with anger. This was the source of their strength, and such waste was completely unforgivable. Ling Han withdrew his sword. This black chi was really stubborn, and even the divine demon sword had to slash for so long. If he was unarmed, perhaps he wouldn't be able to deal with it. He had killed more than a dozen people in a row, finally establishing his prestige. Although there were still many people staring at him with eager expressions, they did not make a move in the end. It was true that the black gas would affect a martial artist's character. It would make people bloodthirsty, but it would not completely change a person's IQ. If there was a chance, these people would take the risk. But if the gap in strength was so big that it was impossible, they would naturally not die in vain. However, it did not mean that there were no powerful existences here. A man walked over with large strides. He looked like a giant gorilla, and was about 3 meters tall. His back was arched, and his head was tilted forward. His tongue was sticking out. It was a foot long and blood red, like a hanged ghost. On the other side, an old woman with a sword on her back quietly appeared. She was dressed in green. Behind Ling Han, a red-clothed young man was moving stealthily like a spirit leopard. There was not the slightest fluctuation of aura, and it was impossible for divine senses to detect him. Only the naked eye could see him. Ling Han's gaze turned cold. Do you all want to die? He's just a fourth firmament immortal king, the gorilla said disdainfully. He strode forward, and every step he took caused the ground to tremble. It made his might even more eye-catching. The old woman drew her sword and said in a hoarse voice, "Your combat strength is not bad. Plundering your cultivation will be beneficial to me." Only the red-clothed young man did not say anything. He was extremely confident in his stealth technique, and believed that it was impossible for Ling Han to see through him. Ling Han stood with his hands behind his back. He had already said what he wanted to say. All that was left was a battle. Die! The gorilla was the first to pounce. He stretched out his arms, and runes lit up on the surface of his body, causing his skin to look like metal. It reflected a blinding light. He leaped high into the air, and his arms transformed into hammers that smashed down heavily at Ling Han. Swoosh! The old woman struck out with her sword at the same time. However, the most lethal attack was still the red-clothed young man behind Ling Han. He was already less than 3 meters behind Ling Han. With a shake of his hands, a 3-clawed blade appeared in each of his hands, and he stabbed them at Ling Han without making a sound. A cruel smile appeared on the red-clothed young man's face. Although his 3-clawed blade was not a celestial tool, it was forged from a precious metal that was second only to divine metal. It was incredibly sharp, and coupled with his own power, Even an 8th heaven celestial king could be killed in a single strike if he was careless. He was a true assassin, and his claws were only inches away from Ling Han. Finally he roared, "Die! The one who should die is you." Ling Han suddenly turned around, and his divine demon sword stabbed out. Pooh! It directly pierced into the red-clothed young man's forehead. This was an existence that surpassed celestial tools. Even a 9th heaven celestial king might not be able to block it with his full-power defense, to say nothing of a mere 5th heaven celestial king. The red-clothed young man's eyes widened, and his face was filled with disbelief. There was still a smile on his face, and he appeared incredibly strange. He couldn't believe that Ling Han could discover him, the king of assassins. It should be known that he had been thrown into the celestial king's cemetery, because he had assassinated too many celestial kings, and some of them had powerful backgrounds. This time, he had ambushed a 4th heaven celestial king as a 5th heaven celestial king. No matter how he thought about it, it was impossible for him to fail. However, he had been killed by a single strike from Ling Han. How could he accept this? Ling Han smiled faintly. "Trying to show off your stealth techniques in front of me? You overestimate yourself." The heaven-deceiving technique that he cultivated had been improved by Wall, and even a first-step heavenly venerable wouldn't be able to detect it. Correspondingly, his ability to discover concealment techniques had also increased greatly. If this red-clothed young man had attacked head-on, he might have been able to block a few more strikes from Ling Han. However, he was too confident in his assassination techniques, and didn't think that Ling Han could counterattack, and the power of that counterattack would be so terrifying. In fact, his death wasn't unjust. On the other side, the attacks of the gorilla and the old woman also arrived. Ling Han didn't even turn around. Pung pung. 2 attacks arrived one after the other. However, a golden light appeared on his body, blocking their attacks. This was naturally the might of the indestructible heaven scroll. What? The gorilla and the old woman both exclaimed in shock, their faces filled with shock. They had been affected by the black aura, but it was only their bloodlust. Their intelligence hadn't been affected. This was far too terrifying. 3 great 5th heaven celestial kings had joined forces, yet not only had they failed to harm a single hair on Ling Han's body, but this 4th heaven celestial king had instead killed one of them with a single strike. Ling Han turned around, a sinister expression on his face. "I already told you not to seek death." He tapped his foot on the ground and attacked with his sword. The gorilla and the old woman retreated repeatedly. Ling Han's attack power was far too ferocious, and they couldn't match it at all. They could only retreat. Die! They unleashed a divine sense attack. This was an extremely powerful move. Ling Han's movements instantly faltered. Haha! The gorilla immediately swatted his arm over. This was an excellent opportunity. Meanwhile, the old woman's body swayed, and she floated to the side. Her target was the black aura that had drifted out from the red-clothed young man's death. Pooh! Ling Han suddenly stabbed out with his sword. The gorilla was shocked. He had thought that Ling Han had been affected by his divine sense attack, but he hadn't expected that it would be the other way around. He hurriedly dodged with all his might, but the sword still stabbed into his left arm. Kakaka! The old woman laughed loudly. She had already swallowed the black aura, and she instantly felt much stronger. She was on her honeymoon, so she wouldn't be updating this week. Chapter 26:15. Everyone was shocked to the point of exploding. 3 powerful cultivators had joined forces to attack, but the result was 1 dead and 1 injured. This young man's battle prowess was too terrifying. Ling Han flashed a smile at the gorilla, yet there was no emotion or color in it. It was as if he was looking at a dead man. "I've said it before, don't come to seek death." He pointed a finger at the gorilla. Ah! The gorilla naturally knew that it had kicked a strong iron plate, but how could it be willing to wait to be cut off? With a loud roar, it had already unleashed its attack on Ling Han's divine sense, charging towards him. Wang! Ling Han felt a slight pain in his head. Even though he was prepared, he was still injured by this attack, although it was not very powerful. It had to be said that this technique was very shocking. It was no wonder that so many celestial kings had fallen for it. For celestial kings, what could be more tempting than powerful strength? Seeing that this attack was effective, the gorilla could not help but reveal a look of surprise. He clenched his fists together and turned them into a heavy hammer that smashed down on Ling Han's head. Ling Han shook his head. Although this attack was effective on him, the gorilla was only a fifth heaven celestial king. At most, it would only cause him a sharp pain, but it would not affect him for long. His finger paused slightly, but then it immediately pointed at the gorilla with a fierce and domineering momentum. Pooh! Although the gorilla tried its best to parry, it was useless. Ling Han's attack pierced through its head, and it died. Everyone was speechless again. Was this really a fourth heaven celestial king? He killed fifth heaven celestial kings like slaughtering chickens. He was indescribably powerful. The old woman once again plundered the black gas that rose from the gorilla's death. She let out a strange cackle, and the surging power in her body made her extremely confident and greedy. She wanted to devour more black gas to make herself stronger. She stared at Ling Han. Although Ling Han had killed 2 people with a sword and a finger, she was fearless. That incomparable feeling of strength also numbed her at the same time. Give up your life for this old woman. She flew out with her arms spread open like a bat. While she was in midair, she opened her mouth. Wang! A sound wave blasted out and attacked Ling Han. Before the sound wave reached him, a wave of psychic thought attacked him first. That was because the sonic shockwave was just a bait. Ling Han felt a stabbing pain in his head. He shook his head. The old woman's psychic attack was much stronger than the gorilla's, and she had only swallowed the black gas from the young man in red and the gorilla. Increasing one's strength seemed to be extremely easy, so it was naturally addictive. Ling Han smiled faintly. I let you seize 2 strands of black qi, because I wanted to see how much stronger you could become. The result is truly disappointing. He reached out and pressed his hand towards the old woman. Bam! The old woman immediately fell from the sky. She was forcefully pulled down by an extremely strong gravitational force. She was overwhelmed with shock. At her height, how could she be affected by gravity? The only thing that could affect her was the rules. This young man's grasp of the rules far surpassed hers, which was why he could easily pull her down. Even though the old woman had been affected by the black aura and had become violent and bloodthirsty, she still revealed a look of fear in the face of an existence far stronger than herself. Survival was the instinct of intelligent creatures. As long as their intelligence remained, their instincts would play a role. The old woman trembled. Listening to Ling Han's words, he had deliberately let her seize the black qi, and his goal was only to make her stronger. How confident! These words not only shocked the old woman, but also the others nearby. They were all tongue-tied, and there was a deep sense of incomprehension. No one knew the origins of the black qi, but they knew that it could increase the attack power of one's divine sense, and it could even increase one's battle prowess by nearly a whole realm. Who wouldn't want such a good thing? But Ling Han had actually discarded it like it was an old shoe. Who could accept this? Ling Han didn't give her a second look. He just pressed down on the air towards the old woman. Pa! The old woman was shaken into a bloody foam. He clapped his hands as if he had done something insignificant. Then his gaze swept across the crowd. This is the price for provoking me. Everyone lowered their heads. This kind of person was definitely a dragon of the 9 heavens. How could they be a match for him? If there were still celestial kings of 5th heaven, and above here, they could still rely on their cultivation level to suppress Ling Han. But now Ling Han was supreme. So what if there were countless celestial kings? So what if the black qi affected their minds? In the face of absolute power, these people all chose to submit. Yet Ling Han wasn't very satisfied. He had originally planned to use the old woman to break through to 5th heaven, but he hadn't expected that he would deliberately go easy on her. The old woman's strength was still so weak. If 5th heaven wasn't enough, 6th heaven probably wouldn't do either. Only 7th heaven celestial kings could pose a sufficient threat to him. Ling Han didn't rashly charge into the final large tomb. There were many 8th heaven and 9th heaven celestial kings inside, and they also possessed terrifying divine sense attacks. If he was attacked by such existences, even Ling Han didn't dare to guarantee that he wouldn't faint, or even have his divine sense directly shattered. He observed from outside, hoping to find some clues. 1 day, 2 days, 10 days. Rumble. On this day, the ground suddenly shook violently, as if there was an earthquake. Then figures flew out from all corners of the large tomb. Pung. One person fell in an area near Ling Han. His incredibly disheveled appearance didn't come from running, but rather from being forced or beaten by an elite. Ling Han walked over, and couldn't help but look surprised. This was because he knew this person. Luo Fuming, Luo Yang's father. When he had killed Luo Yang, Luo Fuming naturally wanted to avenge his son, and fought fiercely with him. In the end, however, he was forced back by Ling Han with the help of the divine demon sword. A seventh heaven celestial king should be a good opponent. Ling Han's eyes lit up, and he strode forward. Luo Fuming crawled to his feet, a look of fear flashing across his face. It was as if he was filled with wariness toward this large tomb, but he couldn't suppress his greed no matter what. He gritted his teeth, and was about to enter the tomb again. Wait! Before he could move, he saw someone stretch out a hand in front of him, looking like they were going to stop him. He walked over, and almost laughed out loud. Fourth Heaven Celestial King. A mere Fourth Heaven Celestial King actually dared to stop him? He humphed inwardly, but didn't hesitate to attack, pressing down on Ling Han. Such a smelly bug could be killed with a single strike. As his palm descended, Ling Han raised his hand lightly, and the impact of regulations transformed into endless ripples. Luo Fuming's attack was instantly dissipated completely. Luo Fuming couldn't help but be stunned. Although this attack hadn't been unleashed with his full strength, it still couldn't suppress a mere Fourth Heaven Celestial King. This reminded him of a person, the enemy who had killed his son. That person also had the ability to fight in the adverse realm, but that evil son was a Third Heaven Celestial King, and his appearance and aura weren't like this. "Who are you, and why do you want to stop me?" he asked in a low voice. The aura of a Seventh Heaven Celestial King surged, and it was incredibly terrifying. Ling Han smiled faintly. "Luo Fuming, don't you recognize me?" "You are?" Luo Fuming frowned slightly. He didn't recognize Ling Han, but he felt that the latter's tone was familiar. Chapter 26:17. Thunderclouds churned as the heavenly tribulation approached. Lightning surged within the thunderclouds, emitting a terrifying aura that would make even 7 firmament immortal kings shudder. Luo Fuming turned pale with fright. Ling Han was actually undergoing his tribulation at this time. This young man's strength was incomparably valiant. When he was at the 4th heaven, he was already able to fight against a 7th heaven. Now that he was going through the 5th heaven's tribulation, would his power be comparable to that of a 8th heaven? Kwang, the first bolt of heavenly tribulation had already descended. Ling Han was fearless. He raised his fist to meet the attack. The lightning struck the iron fist, and thunder element laws erupted. Boundless lightning splashed out, as if a sea of thunder had been overturned. It was incomparably terrifying. Luo Fuming was dumbfounded. Though he knew that Ling Han was very awesome, he was still dumbfounded and unable to believe that Ling Han was this awesome. Because he knew that he might be able to withstand such a heavenly tribulation, but he would definitely have to pay an enormous price. Even if he wasn't heavily injured, it would absolutely be impossible for him to withstand a second strike without suffering any injuries. But would the heavenly tribulation only have one attack? The whole day it was true that he had cultivated a secret technique that greatly increased his battle prowess. But that was only for people. If you used a mental attack on the heavenly tribulation, the heavenly tribulation would slow down for a moment. Therefore, when facing the heavenly tribulation, he was still the same Luo Fuming, who was at the 7th heaven. He had not improved at all. The might of the heavens and earth caused him to tremble. Even though he was an immortal king, and was on the same level as the laws, he still couldn't help but shiver. How could he dare to make a move? Ignoring the fact that if he were to be sucked into the heavenly tribulation, the power of the heavenly tribulation might be magnified according to his cultivation level. Even if it was exactly the same, he would definitely die. How can this brat be so monstrous? He muttered, his expression extremely ugly. Everyone's eyes were also popping out of their sockets. Oh my God, what did I learn? A 4th heaven immortal king can fight against a 7th heaven powerhouse. Moreover, he even broke through in the midst of battle. This heavenly tribulation's power is too terrifying. Why does it feel like the 9 heavens' immeasurable tribulation? Amidst the thunderclouds, Ling Han was engaged in a fierce battle with the heavenly tribulation. To him, the heavenly tribulation was not difficult to endure. Thus, he drew out the divine demon sword and tempered it under the lightning tribulation, drawing such frightening lightning into the sword. This would allow the divine demon sword to possess the might of lightning, and there was a possibility that the divine demon sword could unleash the might of 8th heaven. This was naturally extremely difficult. How could the power of heaven and earth be stolen? However, Ling Han did not care. He was going to transcend the heavenly tribulation anyway. Even if there was only one benefit, it would be a free profit. Clang, 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 the heavenly tribulation continued to strike, and each strike seemed to be able to crush Ling Han into pieces. However, in reality, it was all to no avail. Luo fuming hesitated. Should he continue to wait for Ling Han to finish his heavenly tribulation, or should he leave immediately? He was unwilling to leave. The person who killed his son was right in front of him, and he indeed had the upper hand in terms of combat strength. But if he didn't leave, what if Ling Han survived the heavenly tribulation and his battle prowess sword, and he killed him instead? Therefore, he was very hesitant, unable to advance or retreat. After hesitating for a long time, his expression finally became firm, and he decided to stay. Firstly, he wanted to avenge his son. Secondly, Ling Han definitely had a great secret hidden on him. Otherwise, he could not be so powerful. He had to obtain it. If it was the him before entering the Yuan ancient tomb, perhaps he would choose to retreat as the best strategy. Being strong was good, but his life was obviously more important. But now he was affected by the black qi, and once his greed was triggered, it could not be controlled. Moreover, he was extremely confident in the power of that spiritual attack. He believed that once this move was used, Ling Han would definitely be beaten to a pulp like before. He sat quietly on the side, recovering his state to its peak. At the same time, he was accumulating his strongest attack. Now he had completely grasped the initiative. Making a move only required a thought from him, and he had plenty of time to prepare a powerful move. His strongest move was the 3 yin bone needles, and he needed over 10 breaths of time to prepare one. In a battle where they were evenly matched, there was no time for him to prepare. But now, not only could he shoot out the yin bone needles, he could even shoot out all 3 needles. Luo fuming couldn't help but reveal a wisp of reluctance. He'd obtained these 3 yin bone needles in an ancient ruin before entering the tomb of immortal kings, and they were extremely precious and possessed shocking destructive force. He'd relied on them to assassinate a few immortal kings that were stronger than him. But every time he used them, the yin bone needles would crack a little, and he would probably only be able to use them once more. This sort of reluctance only flashed for a moment before Luo fuming made up his mind. So long as he killed Ling Han, his gains would far exceed the 3 yin bone needles. Not to mention anything else, merely the immortal artifact in this kid's possession was worth it. Time passed quietly, and a day was about to pass. Luo fuming suddenly stood up. He raised his head towards the sky. The lightning clouds were dense yet still, and combined with the time that had passed, they were obviously brewing their final and strongest attack. He stared at Ling Han while his divine perception had firmly locked onto Ling Han. So long as the final bolt of heavenly tribulation struck down, he would immediately follow up and shoot out 3 yin bone needles. Under such circumstances, he would truly not believe that Ling Han would still be able to pass through it safely. Clang! The final bolt of heavenly tribulation struck down, and it was an extremely magnificent sight. It was like a lightning dragon had taken form, and it roared towards Ling Han. At the same time, Luo fuming raised his right hand. Swish! 3 yin bone needles shot out. This was not the end. Luo fuming was waiting. As long as the heavenly tribulation struck down on Ling Han, he would shoot out a spiritual attack. Otherwise, he would be considered to have interfered with the heavenly tribulation, and he would definitely suffer. A cold smirk spread across Ling Han's face. Luo fuming had been waiting on the sidelines all this while, so how could he not have guessed that Luo fuming was planning to ambush him after the heavenly tribulation? He raised the divine demon sword, and faced the final bolt of heavenly tribulation. Then he stretched out his left hand and pressed down on the 3 bone needles. Regulations of time were activated, and the 3 bone needles instantly slowed down. There was a flickering black light, and it was as if they were going to break through the restrictions of the regulations of time. Luo Fuming was astonished. How terrifying was the might of the bone needles! He had assassinated a 3rd heaven celestial king, when he was only a 2nd heaven celestial king. These were definitely precious tools that had been refined by a 9th heaven celestial king. Aside from the level of 9th heaven, they should not be restricted by any regulations. But Ling Han actually made the bone needles stop. How inconceivable was this? This guy had only advanced into the 5th heaven, so was he really so terrifying? However, he was only stunned for a moment. Immediately, he unleashed a spiritual attack. This surpassed regulations, or perhaps it was another kind of regulations. There was no concept of distance at all, and the moment it was unleashed, it blasted into Ling Han's mind. Luo Fuming showed a smug expression. Ling Han would definitely lose control of regulations after being affected by this attack. Even if it was only for an instant, the bone needles would be able to pierce toward Ling Han again, and this time, they would definitely not be blocked. Die! Xiao! The spiritual attack had already arrived, but what shocked Luo Fuming was that the 3 bone needles actually did not move in the slightest. How was this possible? Luo Fuming was completely unable to accept this. This scene had subverted his common sense. Ling Han smiled proudly. He had not simply broken through, but he had also completed the cultivation of the indestructible heaven scroll in terms of his divine sense. This kind of spiritual attack could indeed still affect him, but when it was unleashed by Luo Fuming, it was actually more or less the same as when it had been unleashed by the gorilla and the old woman previously. It only caused him a slight stab of pain, and this was completely within the range that he could endure. Chapter 26:18. After a slight pause, Luo Fuming suddenly turned and ran. Even mental attacks couldn't affect Ling Han, so how could he possibly be a match for Ling Han? Previously, Ling Han was only at the 3rd heaven, and could fight him to a draw with the divine demon sword. Now Ling Han was 2 tiers above him, so if he fought with all his might, would he have any chance of winning? Not only that, but his life would be in danger. He was bloodthirsty, he was greedy, but faced with certain death and certain defeat, he naturally wouldn't be stupid enough to throw his life away. Ling Han shook his head. It's too late. He stretched out his right hand and grabbed at Luo Fuming. Hong! His hand was like a mountain, and regulations materialized, completely sealing off all of Luo Fuming's paths of advance and retreat. No! Luo Fuming paled in shock, his expression filled with regret. Why didn't he escape earlier? And why did he have to force himself into such a desperate situation? He wasn't that kind of person. Luo Fuming felt a strong sense of confusion. He had always been a cautious person, and definitely wouldn't do anything that he wasn't completely sure of. But Ling Han was clearly able to match him when he was at the 3rd heaven. Even if he had grasped the mental attack secret technique, the latter had already advanced to the 4th heaven, and now had broken through to the 5th heaven. Why was he still controlled by greed? Even now, he still didn't understand what had influenced him to actually do something that completely went against his nature. Ling Han's palm landed. Without any suspense, Luo Fuming was instantly blasted into pieces. Once the mental attack was ineffective, Luo Fuming couldn't compare to the Yin River Celestial King at all. And Ling Han could kill the Yin River Celestial King when he was at the 4th heaven, and now that he had advanced to the 5th heaven, killing Luo Fuming was as easy as flipping his palm. When the surrounding Celestial Kings saw this, they all paled in shock, trembling in fear. This 5th heaven Celestial King was too ferocious, wasn't he? He only needed a palm to kill a 7th heaven Celestial King? His strength should be soaring to the 8th heaven, right? Yet Ling Han shook his head slightly. As his cultivation level grew higher, he discovered that it was increasingly difficult to kill enemies of a higher cultivation level. Luo Fuming was only an Emperor Stage 7. If not for the special environment here, he would not have been able to cultivate to Stage 7. Such a Level 7 expert was extremely weak, and that was why he could easily slap him to death. But if it was a level 7 emperor, then it wouldn't be so easy to kill him. If others were to know of his lament, they would definitely scold Ling Han for being too greedy. You've crossed 2 realms to kill an enemy. This is already a heaven-defying act. What's there to feel pity about? Ling Han searched Luo Fuming's spatial divine tool, but there were only hundreds of ascending dragon pills inside. Compared to Green Ghost Immortal King's treasury, it naturally paled in comparison. There was nothing he could do about it. He was only a 7th Firmament Immortal King. Ling Han sat down cross-legged and held the plain scroll in his hand. Once the upper limit of his realm was lifted, he would naturally be able to improve his physical skills by another level. He did not know what dangers were hidden in the Yuan ancient tomb, but it was definitely not easy to deal with. Otherwise, those 9th Heaven Immortal Kings would have already obtained the remaining parts of the 9 transformations heaven scripture and left the tomb. Naturally, the stronger he was, the better. Moreover, he did not need to spend too much time. Although that was what he said, there was no movement from Ling Han after he sat down. In the blink of an eye, 17 years had passed. During this long period of time, some immortal kings killed their way into the Yuan ancient tomb. They could not suppress their greed and wanted a share of the loot. There were also many immortal kings who fought bloody battles outside. Their corpses lay in front of the tomb. There were also new immortal kings who arrived insufferably arrogant. However, no one went to provoke Ling Han, because the story of how he had killed Luo Fuming with a single palm strike was still circulating among the masses. Even if the newcomers did not really believe such a story, there was no need for them to provoke Ling Han. What if the legend was true? However, there were always people who believed themselves infallible. What nonsense are you talking about? A 5th Firmament Immortal King killing a 7th Firmament Immortal King? How can there be such a ridiculous thing in this world? A woman said charmingly. She was extremely beautiful, but her face was filled with pride. That's right. Why don't you say that he killed a 9th Firmament Immortal Emperor? Someone echoed. This was a group of young people filled with the hedonistic air of a spoiled brat. There were a total of 9 people, 6 men and 3 women. Their strength was very close. Most of them were 5th Firmament Immortal Kings. 2 of them were 6th Firmament Immortal Kings. They were a man and a woman. Young Master Su is an immortal emperor that only appears once in a trillion years. However, he is at most invincible within the same realm. A man dressed in black gave a thumbs up to the 6th Firmament Immortal King. Now, someone is actually saying that a 5th Firmament Immortal King can kill a 7th Firmament Immortal King. Where does that put us, young Master Xing? There's also our sister Qing. She is also a 6th Firmament Immortal Emperor. In the future, she will definitely become a peerless great empress of the 9th Firmament, another woman said. The man and woman who were praised revealed reserved smiles, but their expressions were extremely arrogant. Obviously, they had accepted such praise with a smile and felt that they were worthy of it. Who is that person? Step forward and let me Lu Yuheng see if he has 3 heads or 6 arms. A purple-robed young man stepped forward. He swept his gaze across the crowd and looked down on everyone. What an arrogant fellow, someone muttered. Shh, don't speak nonsense. Don't you know these people? His companion hurriedly warned him. Are they very impressive? The first person asked, puzzled. They are the young masters and young mistresses of Sky Transformation City, his companion said. His Sky Transformation City. The first person revealed a look of shock. Legend has it that it was founded by the few immortal kings who entered the Immortal King's Cemetery first. It is also one of the first cities to be built in the Immortal King's Cemetery. His companion nodded. That's right. Sky Transformation City is filled with experts. There are as many as 109th Firmament Immortal Kings. Moreover, those who were imprisoned in the Immortal King's Cemetery the earliest are all true experts. Which one of them doesn't have a terrifying background? There's no need to talk about their outstanding talent. Even their sons and nephews are similarly powerful. It's said that many of them are immortal emperors. The first person took a deep breath. Even if it was in the Firefrost Plain, immortal emperors were still extremely rare. However, the immortal territory might produce 1 in a trillion miles. And here, It was 1 in 1 trillion miles. Being able to be crowned with the title of Immortal Emperor could already explain the problem. Soft discussions like this occurred in many corners as well. Even if everyone's minds were affected by the black energy, the most basic reverence was still there, and all of them kept silent like cicadas in the winter. Lu Yuheng looked down upon everyone. Even though the discussions in the surroundings weren't loud, he could hear them clearly, and it caused him to be extremely complacent. The name of Sky Transformation City had always been very useful. He scoffed and said, "As expected, they're just boasting. They actually don't even dare to stand out when they see this young master. Haha." He casually pointed at a person and said, "You tell this young master where that so-called monstrous genius is." The person who was pointed at naturally didn't want to offend Ling Han in the slightest, but he hadn't seen Ling Han display his might with his own eyes, and he'd only heard about it from others. Thus, the threat of Sky Transformation City was obviously even greater, and it caused him to only hesitate for a moment before pointing at Ling Han. Lu Yuheng looked over and saw a person sitting cross-legged extremely far away in the distance. The surroundings were empty, and it was like a host of stars surrounding the moon. It was also like a great immortal emperor that reigned supreme in the world, yet was destined to be alone. Chapter 26:19. Lu Yuheng looked at Ling Han and couldn't help but feel a sense of insignificance. It was as if he wasn't facing a level 5 celestial king, but a high and mighty level 9 celestial emperor. He hurriedly shook his head. He was here to teach this person a lesson and let everyone know that a level 5 celestial king killing a level 7 celestial king was simply a fantasy. How could it be real? He had actually been frightened by this guy. How embarrassing. "Yuheng, why are you standing there like a fool? Are you afraid?" Someone laughed from behind. This was Lu Yuheng's companion, and he noticed the subtle change in Lu Yuheng. Lu Yuheng immediately flew into a rage and said loudly, "Why would I be afraid?" He stared at Ling Han. "That brat actually dares to sit so carelessly in front of me? Is he tired of living?" Although Ling Han had been absorbing the plain scroll's energy, he wasn't in a state of seclusion. He could stop at any time. It was just whether he wanted to or not. He glanced at Lu Yuheng and revealed a hint of impatience. "Scram! Ha 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 ha." Ling Han's reply caused most of Lu Yuheng's companions to laugh. "Lu Yuheng, this guy seems to be looking down on you. This is really embarrassing." He was actually scolded in public by someone who came out of nowhere. These people laughed and laughed, causing Lu Yuheng's expression to become more and more unsightly. He had originally only wanted to teach Ling Han a lesson, but after being mocked by his companions, his killing intent immediately rose. He's really courting death. He brazenly attacked, his hands moving, and the great Tao of Earth was guided by him. It turned into hundreds of meteors that smashed towards Ling Han. "Lu Yuheng is getting stronger and stronger," said the level 6 celestial king. His name was Su Huan, and he had the highest status. His words also carried a tone of criticism, placing himself above Lu Yuheng. This move, Myriad Star Descent, is Lord Lu Sun's ultimate move. Although Lu Yuheng is unable to display even a 10,000th of its power, it is already very extraordinary for someone at the 5th layer of the heavenly layer. The 6th layer of the heavenly layer also commented. Her name was Zhao Qing, and her background was similar to Su Huan's, but her cultivation was slightly inferior. He looks like Lu Yuheng is really angry," someone said with a laugh. "Who told you to provoke him like this?" a woman pouted. "This kid is courting death. He can't blame anyone." The other men shook their heads in succession. They'd just entered this place and hadn't been affected by the black gas, but as the descendants of a few great figures of Tianhuadu, they naturally wouldn't place human lives in their eyes. So be it. Who asked this brat to just happen to bump into him? Rumble. More than 100 meteors smashed down. Each one was equivalent to the full-powered attack of a 5th heavenly sovereign. This was naturally terrifying. In an instant, the entire area was flattened, leaving only dust that soared into the sky and formed a huge mushroom cloud. Just like that. I had thought that he would at least have some strength after all the bragging. I didn't expect him to be so weak. Haha. I really don't know who boasted it. Su Huan. and the others were extremely disdainful of Ling Han. Many of the people who came later felt like they'd been deceived. What kind of expert was this? He was simply too weak. Can't even withstand a single blow. Lu Yuheng placed his hands behind his back and said softly, but his words echoed in everyone's ears. This was very arrogant, but who asked him to really have the strength? Who did you say can't even withstand a single blow? A clear voice came from the center of the dust explosion. Then a young man walked out with large strides. No matter how chaotic the rules were, they couldn't even get close to him. Naturally, it was Ling Han. What? Impossible. Oh my God. When Ling Han walked out as if he were taking a stroll, everyone's eyes widened, and expressions of disbelief appeared on their faces. Even Su Huan and Zhao Qing were slightly moved. With their strength as sixth heaven monarchs, they naturally could also do this. But Ling Han was only fifth heaven. Lu Yuheng was stunned at first, and then his expression became fierce. You merely withstood one of my moves. What's so great about that? He was not the slightest bit afraid. There were still two great elites, Zhao Qing and Su Huan, behind him. And there was also a colossus like Tian Huadu. What use was a mere fifth heaven celestial king, no matter how powerful he was? He attacked again and grabbed out with his palm. The great Tao of earth evolved again, turning into a heavenly halberd that pierced viciously at Ling Han. Ling Han's eyes were cold. Though he knew that he was indeed very good at causing trouble, he was really too innocent this time. He was meditating and cultivating without rhyme or reason, so who did he have to be in the way? Now that he was already at the fifth heaven, his body technique, added with the power of regulation, and the divine demon sword, it was not difficult for him to match battle prowess at the eighth heaven. If he encountered a ninth heaven celestial king, he could also calmly escape. In this graveyard of the celestial king, what need was there for him to have any scruples? If a tiger doesn't show its might, do you really think I'm a sick cat? Ling Han shot out a punch. Pung! That heavenly halberd instantly shattered, turning into countless fragments of regulations that bounced off. Pa pa pa. A few fragments even swept past Lu Yuheng's face, instantly leaving behind a few wounds, blood seeping out. Ling Han charged straight in, and struck out a palm at Lu Yuheng. Lu Yuheng paled in shock. He wanted to dodge, but a mere fifth heaven heavenly sovereign, if he could still dodge the present Ling Han's grab, then he would definitely be on the same level as Ji Wuming and Xiaoing Xiong. Pung! Lu Yuheng was slapped to the ground by Ling Han. He was just about to crawl up, but Ling Han stomped down on his head with a foot as heavy as a star, making him unable to move at all. He was both angry and embarrassed. He was the young master of the supreme elite of Tianhua capital Lu Sun. When had he ever suffered such grievances before? Those who had seen Ling Han kill Luo Fuming earlier only sneered coldly. Ling Han could even suppress a seventh heaven celestial king with a flip of his hand. So what did a mere fifth heaven heavenly sovereign count for? They had already told him that Ling Han was incomparably tyrannical, yet he still wanted to go up and take a beating. Wasn't that just asking for trouble? But even more people had only heard of how powerful Ling Han was. Now that they had personally witnessed it, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air, feeling incomparably shocked. Su Huan's gaze twitched, and an expression of anger appeared on his face. However, he quickly suppressed it and said indifferently, "Release him, then break an arm and a leg, and I can spare your life." Did you hear that? Hurry up and release him. The others immediately started to clamor. Our young master Su isn't always so easy to talk to. Don't miss this opportunity. Do you know who we are? Ling Han was startled. These people were too arrogant, weren't they? He looked at Su Huan with a faint smile. Are you ordering me around? Release him. Don't force this young master to make a move, Su Huan said indifferently. Although he had seen Ling Han in action, he was still very confident. Young Master Su, kill him, kill this bastard. Lu Yuheng shouted. This guy actually dared to humiliate me. I want him dead. Ling Han slowly lifted his leg. When everyone saw this, they all thought that Ling Han had compromised, and they all shook their heads. There's nothing we can do about it. He's from Tianhua capital, and there are many old monsters there. It's said that one of them can slaughter an entire city. If we provoke these people, which power can withstand them? Even though the Barren Moon Alliance, 10,000 Dragon Alliance, and Spring and Autumn Alliance have the advantage in numbers, Tianhua capital is definitely not weaker than any of them. This is a wise move. Just as everyone was discussing, Ling Han's foot landed without hesitation. Pa! Lu Yuheng's entire head was instantly crushed like a watermelon. Chapter 26-21. It took a long time to describe, but from the moment Su Huan summoned the first malicious spirit until now, only an instant had passed. 81 7th heaven level malicious spirits roared at Ling Han. This was too terrifying. 81 malicious spirits were enough to make an early stage 8th heaven celestial king retreat. Everyone shook their heads. There was no suspense now. No matter how strong Ling Han was, he could not reach the height of the 8th heaven, and would definitely be torn to pieces by these malicious spirits. This was the might of a celestial tool. Ha ha ha, in front of a celestial tool, how can you turn things around? Su Huan said proudly. This was what he was relying on. Kneel and accept your death, and I can consider giving you a quick death. Ling Han shook his head. You only want the might of this celestial tool. Do you really think I can't do anything to you? You still dare to be arrogant on the brink of death. Su Huan sneered coldly. Hurry up and kneel. Zhao Qing and the others shouted. Now they stood in a position of absolute advantage. Truly a group of frogs at the bottom of a well, Ling Han said calmly. Shua, the divine demon sword appeared. A cold light flashed. Pa 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 pa. All the malicious spirits were cut in half by the sword. Su Huan, however, did not care. These malicious spirits were not corporeal, but a celestial tool that killed one powerful being after another, trapping their divine sense in the soul-destroying drum forever. If they were cut in half, then so be it. They could immediately reconnect. Just a last-ditch struggle, he said disdainfully, but in the next instant his eyes widened. Although these ghosts struggled with all their might, wanting to regroup, they could not do it no matter what, and just rolled around. How was this possible? An attack from a celestial tool was actually so fragile? But he did not know that the divine demon sword in Ling Han's hand was also a celestial tool, and had also devoured a lot of divine metal. Although it had not yet reached the level of a heavenly venerable treasure, it had at least pulled away from ordinary divine metal by a large margin. Previously, when Ling Han was undergoing tribulation, he had drawn tribulation lightning into the sword. Although it did not absorb much, after being purified by the powerful tribulation lightning of the 8th heaven, the power of the divine demon sword naturally increased greatly. The power of this sword was comparable to that of an expert at the 8th firmament. He had an absolute advantage in terms of power, and added with the innate sharpness and destructive power of the divine demon sword. These evil spirits were naturally sliced apart with a single slash. Moreover, they were unable to recover no matter how hard they tried. Otherwise, wouldn't the divine demon sword have fallen to the level of an ordinary celestial tool? Everyone was at a loss for words. The drum in Su Huan's hand was an immortal artifact personally refined by a 9th heaven immortal king. Even if Su Huan couldn't unleash its full power, the 81 7th heaven vengeful ghosts were enough to make an early 8th heaven immortal king tremble. However, Ling Han settled it with a single sword strike. Bam! How could he be so strong? How could he be so strong? Ling Han sheathed his sword and walked toward Su Huan. Do you have any more moves? Su Huan's expression kept changing. He really couldn't stand Ling Han's arrogance, but what could he do? He had even taken out his celestial artifact. If that still couldn't suppress Ling Han, then he would have to ask his father for help. Unfortunately, his father had long since entered the Yuan ancient tomb. How could distant water be able to put out a nearby fire? You win! Su Huan was really flexible. He forcefully suppressed his anger and turned to leave. When he met up with his father, he would ask his father to suppress Ling Han. Who said you could leave? Ling Han said unhurriedly. Could it be that you still want to keep me here? Su Huan said proudly. His father was Su Fang. Not only was he a 9th heaven celestial king, but he was also an emperor star. His strength was strong enough to flatten any large city in the cemetery of the celestial king by himself. Moreover, there was a second step celestial venerable behind the Su clan. Ling Han shook his head. If you don't have any new moves, then die. He punched out, blasting toward Su Huan. He hadn't made a move just now, because he wanted to see if Su Huan had any more ultimate moves. Since Su Huan was already at his wit's end, he naturally wouldn't hold back anymore. What, you actually dare to attack me? Su Huan was both shocked and angry. Could it be that Su Huan didn't know who he was? He hurriedly struck the soul-destroying drum again, and vengeful ghosts appeared. As long as his power was endless, he could also continuously summon vengeful ghosts to help. Bang! However, as soon as a vengeful ghost appeared, it was destroyed by a single punch from Ling Han. Now that Ling Han's battle prowess was comparable to an 8th heaven, how could a mere 7th heaven vengeful ghost be a match for a single punch from him? Su Huan hurriedly retreated, while continuing to strike the soul-destroying drum. With his 6th heaven cultivation, he had to use a 7th heaven attack. Even if it was due to the immortal artifact, it still made him feel so uncomfortable that he wanted to vomit blood. If this went on, even if Ling Han didn't kill him, he would still die from exhaustion. Do you know who I am? He couldn't help but roar. I am Su Feng's son. My father is a 9th heaven emperor star, and he can flatten a city by himself. My Su clan's patriarch is also a 2nd step celestial venerable. If you dare to kill me, my father will definitely not spare you. Even if you escape to the cemetery of the celestial king, my patriarch will still be able to sense your aura. You won't be able to escape death no matter where you go. A 2nd step celestial venerable was an existence that truly transcended heaven and earth. He could guarantee the strength of a 1st step celestial venerable, no matter where he went. Yet Ling Han's footsteps didn't stop. His Tao was unstoppable, and his Tao courageously advanced forward. If he became timid just because he was wary of a 2nd step heavenly venerable tier, then his achievements would only be SOSO. His principle was extremely simple. If people didn't offend him, he wouldn't offend them. If people offended him, he would repay them 100-fold. Su Huan kept vomiting blood. He was really trying his best to activate the soul-destroying drum. But every vengeful ghost ended up being destroyed by a single punch from Ling Han. There was no way to accumulate a certain number of vengeful ghosts to form a qualitative change. However, if he didn't summon these vengeful ghosts, he would die even faster. Now he was drinking poison to quench his thirst. He knew that this would exhaust himself to death, but he had no choice but to do it. Let's attack together. On the other side, Zhao Qing hurriedly said. If this went on, Su Huan would definitely die. The other 6 trembled. Even with Su Huan's strength and immortal artifact, he was still completely suppressed by Ling Han. What was the use of them attacking? Did they have immortal artifacts? And did they have the cultivation of the 6th heaven? Sister Qing, let's hurry up and run. Right where there's life, there's life. As long as we find the lords, it won't be too late to save young Master Su. They all retreated, not daring to throw away their lives. Zhao Qing was furious, not to mention the fact that it was very difficult for them to encounter Su Feng and the others. Even if they did, who knew how long it would take? Su Huan's grave would probably be covered in grass by then. These cowards. She let out a long howl, drew out her sword and charged toward Ling Han. She and Su Huan weren't just friends. They were engaged and had been engaged for a long time. She was also very satisfied with this fiancé of hers, and had great expectations for him. How could she die here? Zhao Qing joined the battle, and with a horizontal slash of his sword, thousands of waves of fire swept up. Ling Han turned around, and pressed a finger at Zhao Qing. Pooh! The waves of fire were instantly extinguished, and a bloody hole appeared in Zhao Qing's chest. His aura plummeted. Swoosh! Taking advantage of this opportunity, Su Huan turned around and ran, completely ignoring his fiancé. Su Huan! Zhao Qing was stunned. She completely didn't expect that her fiancé would repay her in this way, after she had risked her life to save Su Huan. Ling Han shook his head. How shameless! His eyes shone with a cold light. How naive of him to think that he could escape just like that. Chapter 26-22. Ling Han took a step forward, and the laws of space stirred. Bam! Su Huan was running, but he slammed into a wall, sending him flying back. He was astonished. With his strength as a sixth heaven monarch tier, any wall would shatter upon collision with him. Moreover, where had this wall come from? He focused his gaze, yet his expression changed drastically. That was because this wall was shockingly Ling Han. I've really overestimated you. With such a temperament, you still have the face to live. Ling Han said coldly as he threw a punch at Su Huan. No. Su Huan blocked the soul-extinguishing drum. This was an immortal artifact. Even if he couldn't fully recover, Ling Han could forget about breaking it by force. Of course, Ling Han wouldn't take the initiative to clash head-on with an immortal artifact. Perhaps he wouldn't be able to unleash the might of an immortal artifact. However, if he directly collided with it, it would be tantamount to activating the immortal artifact on its own, which was a foolish move. He withdrew his fist, and it was extremely fast. Su Huan revealed a look of joy. He had successfully dodged a calamity, and after he activated a movement technique, his speed would soar by 4 times. At that time, it would be impossible for Ling Han to catch up to him. In your dreams, Ling Han's cold voice rang out. Crack. Su Huan heard the sound of bones breaking, and then a strange pain assaulted him, causing him to stumble and crash to the ground. He felt his entire lower body go numb, and he couldn't feel anything. His pelvis had been completely shattered by Ling Han's kick. But an immortal king was an immortal king. How could he just wait for death with a broken bone? Su Huan couldn't care less about the pain. His strong desire to live made him move his hands continuously, slapping the ground. Instantly he was flying. At this level, whether it was an attack technique or a movement technique, they were actually not limited to using the hands or feet. This was because the operation of the laws required divine sense. Su Huan didn't even dare to look at Ling Han. He only had one thought in his mind, and that was to escape. I've said it before. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them, Ling Han said indifferently. But if people offend me, I'll return it 100 times over. Puffed. By the time he finished speaking, he had already caught up to Su Huan. With a punch, he blasted a large hole in Su Huan's back. How dare you? Su Huan said in a trembling voice. This punch had directly exploded his heart. This was an extremely serious injury, but what was even more fatal was Ling Han's martial art consciousness. It was wreaking havoc in his body. His spirit could not withstand a single blow from this will, and his knowledge was on the verge of collapsing. And this was his doomsday. My father will definitely kill you. Kill you, he shouted, and then he fell to the ground, his eyes still wide open. Here the lives of immortal kings were like dogs. So what if one was as strong as a sixth heaven emperor? So what if one was a descendant of an Empyrean? Ling Han retracted his fist and glanced at the remaining 7 people. Pa pa pa. These people knelt down one after another, trembling in fear. Mercy. They all lowered their heads to the ground. Ling Han remained unmoved and said, If I fall into your hands, will you spare me? Obviously not. He attacked. Pa pa pa. How could a fifth heaven celestial king withstand a blow from Ling Han? All of their heads exploded. In just a short while Su Huan and the others were all killed. The surroundings were deathly silent. The gaze that looked at Ling Han was as if they were looking at a corpse. Those 9 people came from Tianhuadu, and there were supreme ninth heaven celestial emperors overseeing them. You killed all of their descendants with a swing of your blade. It was indeed satisfying to kill, but it also left a lot of trouble for yourself. Therefore, although Ling Han seemed alive, he was actually already a dead man. In this celestial king prison, there was absolutely no one who could stop Su Fang and the other supreme celestial kings from killing people, no matter who the opponent was. However, Ling Han didn't care in the slightest. Since he had already advanced to the 5th heaven, he was confident that he could escape from a 9th heaven celestial king. Moreover, his strength was increasing with every passing moment. When he reached the 6th heaven, he would probably be able to contend against even a 9th heaven celestial king. He stared at the soul destruction drum, slightly troubled. This was a celestial tool, and contained a large amount of celestial metal. If he let the divine demon sword devour it, it would definitely advance in the direction of a celestial venerable treasure tool. Unfortunately, this was refined by a 9th heaven celestial king, And in a situation where there was no one to control it, it was even more ferocious. Even Ling Han did not dare to move, or else he would be facing a ninth heaven celestial king directly. And now, when he encountered the battle prowess of a ninth heaven celestial king, he could only turn and run. Forget it, I'll come back to collect it in the future, Ling Han thought. It could be considered that he had his mind on it. He headed towards the Yuan ancient tomb. Right now, there were at least 90% of the ninth heaven celestial kings in the cemetery of the celestial king, and not all, but 99% should have been affected by the black qi, becoming bloodthirsty and crazy. If he entered, it would definitely be extremely dangerous. Although this was what he thought, Ling Han did not hesitate to take a step forward. He was too curious about what Huang Yu wanted to do. He walked towards the Yuan ancient tomb, and his figure quickly disappeared inside. In the Yuan ancient tomb, Su Feng was engaged in an intense battle with a black shadow. It was not only him, but there were also several ninth heaven celestial kings assisting him in the battle. Even so, their side was unable to gain the upper hand. The battle was unusually stalemate. If anyone saw this scene, they would definitely exclaim in disbelief. Just what kind of existence was this black shadow? It was actually so powerful that even the combined forces of so many ninth heaven celestial kings could not defeat it. If one looked closely, they would discover that the black shadow actually had a limited range of movement. That was why Su Feng and the other immortal kings were not defeated even though they could not win. However, the black shadow was too fast. It was impossible to tell what it was, whether it was a human, a beast, a treasure, or something else. At such a critical moment, Su Feng suddenly paused. He was the absolute main force, so this pause naturally increased the pressure on the other immortal kings. One of the immortal kings was even sent flying by the black shadow. A wound opened up on his chest, and he was severely injured. Retreat! Another ninth heaven celestial king hurriedly shouted. They hurriedly retreated, because the black shadow had a limited range of movement. It chased them for a distance before retreating. Brother Su, what happened to you? Everyone looked at Su Feng. Su Feng's expression was cold as he said, My son was killed. What? Everyone was shocked. Who was so bold as to attack someone from Heaven Transformation City? Which madman did it? The Barren Moon Alliance, Spring and Autumn Alliance, or Myriad Dragon Alliance? Do they think that a few ninth heaven celestial kings can become enemies with my Heaven Transformation City? With a thought, Su Feng grabbed at the void and said, When I take back the soul destruction drum, we will know who the murderer is. Everyone was even more shocked when they heard this. Su Huan had the soul destruction drum, but he had still been killed. Even if Huan can't unleash the soul destruction drum's full power, he should be able to reach the early stage of the eighth heaven. The murderer must have at least the middle stage of the eighth heaven. There are too many people in the Immortal King Cemetery who meet such conditions. It can't be narrowed down. However, there is no one in the younger generation who can kill Huan. It must be an old monster who has been a king for many years. As everyone spoke, they saw a small blood-colored drum fly over. Su Feng held it in his hand. He sensed it slightly and couldn't help but reveal a look of shock and anger. The one who killed my son is a fifth heaven celestial king. Chapter 26-23. Fifth Firmament Immortal King. The other immortal kings all started. How could this be possible? After analyzing for half a day, although it was all nonsense, they were certain that the attacker must have a combat prowess at the mid-phase of the eighth heavenly layer or above. How could a mere fifth firmament immortal king have such combat strength? Wasn't this the greatest joke in the world? Brother Su, could it be wrong? A celestial king asked. He was also a ninth heaven great emperor, and he was the first person to be imprisoned in the celestial king's cemetery. However, he was only an emperor, so he wasn't as strong as Su Shan. However, he also had the backing of a second-step celestial sovereign, so he wasn't inferior to Su Shan in the slightest. The earliest people who were thrown into the Immortal King's cemetery were definitely related to the Empyrean. If others heard his words, they would probably laugh themselves to death. A dignified ninth heaven supreme sovereign would actually make a mistake. However, the others did not laugh at all. To them, This was indeed something that was completely impossible. The only reasonable explanation was that Su Feng was wrong. Su Feng snorted. He was naturally displeased to be doubted, but he knew that it was somewhat unbelievable. Therefore, he forcefully suppressed his displeasure. I've heard it clearly through the soul annihilation drum. It was indeed a fifth firmament immortal king who killed my son. He emphasized once again that everyone could only believe him. Would a ninth heaven great emperor spout nonsense? But what makes the killer so powerful? A ninth firmament immortal king analyzed. A fifth firmament immortal king killed a sixth firmament immortal king. Furthermore, nephew Huan has the potential of an emperor. Even if we ignore the soul destruction drum, the culprit's strength must have reached the seventh firmament. Otherwise, it would have been easy for nephew Huan to leave. He's only at the fifth firmament, but he has a cultivation at the seventh firmament. This kid's evolution index is at least 11, said another ninth firmament immortal king. Su Feng's gaze was sharp as he slowly said, not only my son, niece Xiaoqing, nephew Yuheng, and the others were all killed by that murderer. What? The other celestial kings all cried out in surprise. Counting their heads, including Su Feng, there were exactly 9 of them, and they were the fathers of Su Huan and the others. They all followed Su Feng, so there was nothing wrong with Su Huan being the leader of the younger generation. When they suddenly heard that their children had been killed, how could any of them endure it? All of them had flames of rage in their eyes, and they wished for nothing more than to immediately go out and look for the culprit. Su Feng pondered for a moment. We've reached the most crucial moment here. We mustn't give up. Since that murderer has already entered this place, let's take this place first, and then go find that murderer, lest all our previous efforts go to waste. All right. All the immortal kings nodded. In fact, a few of them wanted to directly find Ling Han, but since Su Feng said so, they couldn't object. After thinking about it, Ling Han had entered the Yuan ancient tomb, so they would meet him sooner or later. I hope he's still alive when I meet him again. I'll let him taste all the torture in the world before ending his life. Ling Han entered the primordial ancient tomb. This tomb did not have an entrance. It was forcefully created by the immortal kings. However, the interior of the tomb did have a structure. It was not solid. As he walked, this path was still carved out, but it quickly connected to the passage inside. Both sides were decorated with pearls that emitted a gentle radiance, but some of them had been dug out. This is a jade essence pearl. After taking a look, Ling Han revealed an expression of surprise. Jade essence pearl was a kind of fruit that grew at the bottom of the sea. After maturing, it would shed on its own, and then be enveloped by the icy energy at the bottom of the sea. After billions and billions of years, it could condense into a pearl, and it could increase the cultivation level of a celestial king. Of course, the higher the cultivation level of a celestial king, the weaker the effect of the jade essence pearl. But it still had some effect. Now these pearls were extravagantly used for illumination, and they were given to a dead person. This was really too extravagant. Jade essence pearls were very rare, and it was lucky to find one. But now there were dozens as far as the eye could see. Ling Han stretched out his hand to grab it, and a powerful force swept over. But the jade essence pearl did not move at all. He did not believe this. He took out the divine demon sword, and then used the tip of the sword to pry. With the indestructible divine demon sword, there was a cracking sound, and a jade essence bead had been dug out by him. No wonder some jade essence pearls here had been pried out, but some hadn't. It wasn't that the people who had passed here didn't want to, but they couldn't. How many people had celestial tools? Those that could possess celestial tools were basically ninth heaven celestial kings. So why would they care about jade essence pearls? Furthermore, even jade essence pearls could only be used as a light. So what astonishing treasures were hidden here? Thinking that way, who would still waste time digging out jade essence pearls? Hee. If others don't want to do it, that's their business, but I won't miss it. Not only did Ling Han do it himself, he also called the Empress out of the celestial visitor abode. She also had a celestial tool, and together, they could maximize the efficiency, though the Empress was cold and proud, and thought that everything in the world belonged to her. This jade essence pearl should be gifted to her by someone else. Since Ling Han had spoken, she reluctantly agreed. Ding 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 dang dang dang. They paid no attention to the others, and just dug out jade essence pearls. In any case, so many years had already passed, so it wouldn't matter if they had this little bit of time, right? They dug as they walked, and Ling Han's speed was clearly faster. Firstly, his cultivation level was higher than the Empress, and secondly, the divine demon sword was also sharper. In 3 days, they had already advanced several thousand meters, but the passageway was continuous, and there seemed to be no end. The person buried here should be a heavenly venerable, right? Ling Han guessed. Otherwise, a ninth heaven celestial king wouldn't be so extravagant and possess so many jade essence pearls. The Empress nodded. In that case, the remaining 6 parts of the 9 transformations heaven scroll might be hidden here. Impossible. Ling Han shook his head. Huang Yu is an unfathomable person. Who knows what he wants to do? They continued to advance, and after a few more days, this passageway was finally about to reach its end. But just at this moment, the sound of footsteps came from behind. Judging from their auras, there should be 8 celestial kings. When one reached the celestial king tier, they could completely make no sound when they landed. But the other party just happened to make the sound of footsteps, which meant that they were confident, or perhaps arrogant, and had no scruples. Very soon, 8 young people appeared. Their cultivation levels were uneven, with some at the 3rd heaven, and some at the 6th heaven, but all of them were brimming with arrogance. Leave behind the jade essence pearls and scram immediately, a celestial king said. He glanced at the Empress, and couldn't help but reveal a stunned expression. He pointed at her and said, "And this woman? You're courting death." The Empress was sinister, and directly moved with her sword, charging towards the 8 people. "How dare you?" The 8 people hurriedly parried her attack. Ling Han also moved, blocking the 6th heaven celestial kings, and leaving the rest to the Empress to deal with. They actually dared to have designs on his wife. This naturally made Ling Han furious, and he attacked mercilessly. The 2 6th heaven celestial kings couldn't even withstand a single blow. They didn't even have the chance to use their ultimate moves, and directly fell to the ground and died. Yuve caused a great disaster. That's Lady Kong Si's only son. Lady Kong Si is the Emperor Star of the 9th heaven, and her battle prowess is unparalleled. You're destined to die. The others trembled when they arrived. The Empress didn't care. As she brandished her celestial tool, heads rolled. Ling Han sheathed his sword, and indifferently said, "In any case, I've already offended many 9th heaven celestial kings. One more won't make a difference." Chapter 26-25. The 5 people also arrived. Ling Han's group swept their eyes over, and all stopped on the Empress. The Empress's beauty could be said to be earth-shattering. The 7th heaven celestial king immediately came over and said, "I'm Wan Gaojia. May I know your name, fairy?" The Empress directly ignored him, and only gave him a disgusted expression. If it was Ling Han, this Wan Gaojia would definitely burst out with killing intent, and directly kill him. But the Empress was originally the cold and arrogant type. This kind of temperament, and this kind of expression made Wan Gaojia's heart itch, and he wanted to pluck this arrogant rose with thorns. "Fairy, our young master Wan is Wan Qingbai's son." The person beside him helped. Lord Wan Qingbai is the 9th heaven Emperor Star, one of the first people to enter the graveyard of the Celestial King, and he can destroy any big city by himself. To be recognized by our young master, Wan is a blessing cultivated over 3 lifetimes. Moreover, our young master Wan is a 7th heaven emperor, and he can become a 9th heaven emperor in the future. Where can we find another such an outstanding talent? Wan Gaojia pretended to be humble, and pressed his hand down, saying, "I just benefited from some of my father's blessings. I'm not as good as everyone says." "A young master Wan, you're too humble. If I were young master Wan, I would have jumped to the sky long ago. Only young master Wan would be so low-key." The 4 people flattered without stopping. The only woman glanced at the Empress, and her face was full of jealousy. "I say, young lady, don't be too reserved. If you miss this opportunity, there won't be another one." Ling Han sighed and said, "Are you guys done?" The 5 of them spoke one after another, and did not stop at all. Only at this moment did Ling Han interject a sentence. Wan Gaojia sneered slightly. A mere fifth heaven celestial king wasn't even qualified to be looked at by him. However, in front of the empress he appeared very humble and said, "Friend, how should I address you?" He was worried that Ling Han was the empress's relative, and it wasn't good to offend him. Ling Han smiled and said, "You don't need to know who I am. We don't have time to talk to you. Don't be like flies here. You might not be annoyed, but we are." Fly Wan Gaojia and the other four were enraged. How dare he call them flies? "How dare you?" said a fifth firmament immortal king in a sinister tone. "Just because young Master Wan is easy to talk to doesn't mean I am the same. If I don't teach you a lesson, you really won't know the immensity of heaven and earth." He immediately lashed out and slapped Ling Han. This was filled with the meaning of looking down on Ling Han. He simply sent a palm strike over, not taking him seriously at all. A cold glint flashed across Ling Han's eyes. He casually pressed his palm down and returned the favor. "You overestimate yourself," said the fifth firmament immortal king coldly. Although he was only a sovereign, his cultivation technique was extremely profound. His combat strength far exceeded that of an ordinary fifth firmament heavenly emperor. The two large hands quickly collided. Pung! One of the large hands immediately crumbled, while the other was not affected at all, and continued to slap forward. Pooh! The fifth firmament immortal king let out a miserable cry. He opened his mouth and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Once he opened his mouth, he couldn't stop vomiting blood no matter what. In the end, his organs spilled out as well. He looked at everyone in misery, but his head tilted to the side, and he directly collapsed to the ground dead. This Wan Gaojia and the other three were incomparably shocked. In a battle of the same cultivation level, a fifth firmament immortal king was actually so weak? "How dare you?" said Wan Gaojia coldly. At this moment, even if Ling Han was the empress's younger brother, he still had to take down Ling Han. Otherwise, wouldn't he disappoint his subordinates? He stood up and stretched out his hand to grab Ling Han. A seventh firmament emperor's attack was almost certain. Ling Han didn't care. He circulated the greenwood raging lightning. An azure lightning coiled around his right hand as he slapped at Wan Gaojia. "You're courting death." Wan Gaojia sneered. A mere fifth firmament immortal king actually dared to clash head-on with him. A seventh firmament emperor? How arrogant was this? He circulated a secret art, wanting to blast Ling Han into dregs with a single strike. Ling Han only smiled faintly. Who exactly was the one courting death? Pa! The two large palms clapped together, instantly setting off a terrifying ripple that shook in all directions. Wan Gaojia only felt an unstoppable force assault him, causing him to involuntarily fly backwards. Then, he felt an intense pain from his right hand, and he saw that it was dripping with blood. Arcs of azure lightning danced chaotically, extending up his arm. He was stunned. With his battle prowess at the peak of the seventh firmament emperor, to be able to break his arm with a single strike, it had to be at least the battle prowess of the eighth firmament, right? A fifth firmament immortal king. He fell heavily to the ground, and felt his entire body trembling. It was indescribable discomfort. When the remaining three saw this, they were all speechless. This scene was completely unacceptable to them. In fact, they could not even imagine it. "How can you be so strong?" Wan Gaojia crawled up, and his gaze towards Ling Han was filled with fear and jealousy. Just now, he felt the pressure of death, but at the same time, he was extremely jealous that a fifth firmament immortal king could be so powerful. If he could also have such battle prowess, wouldn't he be able to disregard even a ninth firmament immortal king? Ling Han smiled faintly. "If I'm not a little stronger, how can I protect my lover? And how can I eliminate a Xiao Xiao like you?" Xiao Xiao. Wan Gaojia almost went crazy from anger. He was a seventh firmament emperor, and also a descendant of a heavenly venerate. How dare he say that he was Xiao Xiao? He looked at Ling Han coldly, thinking that as long as he escaped this calamity, he would find his father and ask him to kill Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head. "You still want to leave alive in my hands?" Wan Gaojia snorted. Immortal kings were difficult to kill. Even if his battle prowess was slightly weaker than Ling Han's, it was at most a level lower. If he wanted to escape, how could Ling Han stop him? I will remember today's enmity, he said through gritted teeth. After saying that, he directly leaped off the ground. Boom! He instantly erupted with astonishing speed. Go! Ling Han did not chase after him. He only raised his right hand. Z! A green lightning condensed into a spear, and then with a whoosh he threw it out. The lightning spear was astonishingly fast, and in an instant, it had already caught up to Wuxia. It pierced through his back, and forcefully nailed him to the ground. Ah! Wuxia let out a pained howl. His heart had been pierced by the terrifying lightning power. At this moment, the lightning power was still rampaging in his body, making him feel as though he was about to be torn apart. Quickly release young Master Wan. He is Lord Wan Chengbai's only son. If you kill him, your entire clan will be wiped out. The remaining 3 people hurriedly threatened Ling Han. Humph! Ling Han raised his right hand. Xiao! Another 3 lightning spears were thrown out by him, nailing those 3 people to the ground as well. They were not like Wuxia, whose vitality had been instantly destroyed by the greenwood violent lightning. Lightning could represent the heaven and earth in delivering punishment, and was the representation of destructive and violent power in the first place. If it were not for the fact that Wuxia was a 7th heaven monarch tier, and had powerful strength, he would have long since been completely dead by now. Let's go. Ling Han was slightly dispirited. As his cultivation level became higher and higher, there were fewer and fewer people that could be a match for him. The Empress and bewitching Maiden Row nodded and followed after him. Only after they had left for a long time did Wuxia's head hang down, completely losing all signs of life. Chapter 26. Ling Han's ability to attract trouble was still there, and he would always encounter spoilt young masters with astonishing backgrounds. Some coveted the Empress's beauty, and some were purely looking for trouble. Naturally, all of them were suppressed by Ling Han. In just a few months' time, the number of spoilt young masters that died at his hands numbered in the hundreds. It could be imagined how many 9th heaven celestial kings, in this Yuan ancient tomb, wanted to take him down and cut off his head. Yet Ling Han was indifferent. He was even slightly looking forward to encountering a 9th heaven celestial king. A fierce battle with such an elite would definitely make him feel endless pressure, and he would rise to the 9th heaven even faster. The 3 of them walked out of the Leyland region, passed through an endless river, crossed over a large snowy mountain, and finally entered a plain. Only then did the grass reach their ankles, and it was soft and very comfortable to step on. But on this plain, there was the blood of a celestial king, and even the blood had dyed a large area of the grass red. It was very strange. How domineering was the blood of a celestial king. If it touched a stone, the stone would immediately turn into dust, and if it touched a plant, the plant should also explode. How could it possibly be like the blood of a mortal? Ling Han bent down to observe. After a while he frowned and said, "The domineering power in the blood has already been erased, and there is only the might of a celestial king, but it is really useless." "Where are the corpses?" the Empress asked. They searched everywhere, but did not see the corpses of celestial kings. Strange, could it be that no celestial kings have fallen? There were traces of a great battle here. Large areas of the plain had been turned into ruins, but the strange thing was that there was only the blood of celestial kings, but not the corpses of celestial kings. It seemed to be inconsistent with such a great battle. "Be careful," bewitching Maiden Row said. Yet the Empress was overflowing with fighting spirit. She had not fought for a very long time. They continued to advance. The plain was boundless, and there seemed to be no end. Boom! Suddenly, the ground broke open, and a giant spear that was 30 meters long suddenly poked out from the ground. Then it ruthlessly smashed towards Ling Han and the others. The spear was entwined with great Tao, and even if it did not pierce them, merely being shaken by the ripples of great Tao would be enough to choke them. The Empress humphed and slashed with her sword. The sword struck the gigantic spear. An immortal artifact was indestructible. Only an immortal artifact, or a 9th firmament immortal king, could withstand it. The gigantic spear was immediately broken by the sword and gray liquid sprayed out. However, the queen was also sent flying. The impact of the spear was too strong, far exceeding the queen's. With a squeak, a huge creature suddenly burrowed out of the ground. It was a 6-legged insect, but it was huge in size. Its body was about 60 meters long, but now only one of its 2 front legs remained. It was as sharp as a spear, because the other had been cut off by the queen. Its entire body was covered in black scales, and was surrounded by the death aura of the netherworld. It looked like a monster that had crawled out of the netherworld. It fixed its eyes on the empress. Gray blood was currently flowing from her severed foot, but it soon stopped. A dim light surged, and this severed foot was currently regrowing. In just a breath's time, it had completely regrown. The gigantic insect screeched, and suddenly sprang out of its 4 legs, pouncing towards the empress. Its 2 front legs moved at the same time, slashing towards the empress's delicate neck. Ling Han humphed softly. His figure flashed, and he had already blocked the path of the gigantic insect. He stretched out his right hand and grabbed towards the gigantic insect. The gigantic insect naturally couldn't ignore him. One of its front legs changed the direction of its slash and slashed down towards Ling Han. Ling Han condensed his right hand, and the greenwood berserk thunder circulated. With the addition of the power of the 9 transformations heaven scroll, he punched out. The gigantic foot was as large as a heavenly spear, and Ling Han's fist couldn't even be compared to it. It seemed like there was no need to know what the result would be. But when the gigantic foot really slashed onto Ling Han's fist, there was a flash of brilliant light, and this gigantic foot actually rebounded. Ka! A crack appeared on the gigantic foot, and then rapidly expanded. In just an instant it covered the entire gigantic foot. Pa! This gigantic foot actually completely collapsed. This caused the gigantic insect so much pain that it kept making strange cries. Balls of 9 underworld flames surged out of its body, showing its intense fury. But this time, the gigantic insect didn't immediately launch an attack. Instead it stared at Ling Han, its lantern-sized eyes exuding a look of wariness. Though it was a violent being, it had an instinctive sense of danger, and thought that Ling Han was very powerful, so it couldn't act rashly. Yet Ling Han wouldn't give it a chance to catch its breath. His figure continued to charge out, and a punch directly shot towards the gigantic insect's head. The gigantic worm hurriedly waved its front legs to parry Ling Han's attack. Pung! How could this possibly block Ling Han's attack? His fist blasted through the thick armor, and his whole body charged straight in. Under the entanglement of azure lightning, Ling Han entered the gigantic worm's skull. The gigantic insect's movements immediately came to a screeching halt, and then crashed to the ground. Pa! A hole had been blasted open in its carapace. Ling Han strode out, green divine lightning weaving around him. There wasn't a single speck of dirt on his body. The corpses of those celestial kings should have been eaten by these things, right? Bewitching Maiden Rose said. Ling Han nodded. Many celestial kings must have died here. Now that the corpses were gone, they must have been buried in the stomachs of these gigantic insects. He grabbed a gigantic foot's leg and studied it carefully. A look of surprise appeared on his face, and he said, "There are many thin thorns on this leg, and they're hollow. With one slash, countless thorns will pierce into the body, and the essence in the blood will be absorbed. In this way, even if the blood of a celestial king was sprinkled, it would only be ordinary blood, and it would be difficult to cause any damage. Let's go." But they didn't go far before new gigantic insects appeared to ambush them. If these insects hid underground, they would have no aura at all, and they wouldn't be discovered at all. They would only be discovered when the gigantic foot broke through the ground to attack. For celestial kings of the 5th and 6th heavens, it was already too late. Fortunately, Ling Han and the others weren't ordinary celestial kings of the 4th and 5th heavens, so they were completely capable of dealing with them. A dozen or so days later, they finally walked out of this plain. In front of them was a small river, spanned by a wooden bridge, and beside the bridge was a small thatched cottage. An old man was sitting in front of the cottage, smoking a hookah that was bubbling. In front of the old man, there was a large group of people surrounding him. All of them wore worried expressions, as if they had encountered an extremely difficult matter. Upon closer inspection, it turned out that the old man was playing chess with someone else. He seemed to have extraordinary chess skills, so he had the leisure to smoke a hookah. His opponent, on the other hand, was dumbfounded, his brows tightly furrowed. What was going on? Ling Han patted the shoulder of the person in front of him and said, "Bro, what are you doing?" The man was startled. He didn't even realize that someone was so close to him. If the other party hadn't patted his shoulder just now, but had launched a fatal attack on him, wouldn't he be dead now? However, when he found that Ling Han's cultivation was only at the 5th heavens, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. After all, he was also at the 6th heavens. Well, he must have been too focused on the chess game just now, so this kid took advantage of the situation. According to his temper, he should have ignored Ling Han. A mere 5th heavens dared to question a 6th heavens, but when he saw Ling Han's dignified expression, he somehow changed his mind and said, "If you want to cross the river, you must win against that old man." Chapter 26-27. Crossing the river? Ling Han appeared very surprised. Isn't it very convenient? This river was only 30 meters wide, and he could cross it with a casual leap. It's not that simple. That person was a burly man who looked to be in his 30s. His eyes were covered with a layer of black, and they exuded a bloodthirsty light. This was the influence of the black aura here, but he didn't attack Ling Han. He was intimidated by Ling Han's invisible pressure, and even he didn't know it. He explained, "If you are a celestial king in the 7th, 8th, or 9th heaven, you naturally can easily pass through. But if a celestial king below that tries to pass through, they will only be blasted to pieces by the river water." "Huh," Ling Han said casually. "So powerful, isn't it? Otherwise, why would we be blocked here?" The burly man said. He pouted at the old man and said, "This isn't a real person, but he is incredibly powerful. He is guarding that bridge, and if you try to pass through, you will only be killed and thrown into the river. It's fine if you want to cross the bridge, as long as you win the game of chess. However, this isn't an ordinary game of chess. You'll know once you try." Pooh. As if to annotate his words, that person who was playing against suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, his face instantly turning pale. Tung tung tung. He retreated 17 steps, his body swaying, and he almost fell head first. He lost again. Sigh, to control a chess piece, one needs to inject their divine sense. Once a chess piece is eaten, their divine sense will be injured. This guy has already lost for the 3rd time, and his divine sense has probably been mostly destroyed. Sigh, I've been here for 16 years, but only 7 people have passed. This is too difficult. Everyone shook their heads. They had all gone up to play against him, but which of them hadn't suffered a crushing defeat, and their divine sense had been injured, and they had suffered? Ling Han couldn't help but feel interested. He strode up and sat down. Who is this brat? He's new, right? I've never seen him before. Newborn calves really aren't afraid of tigers. Does he think this is very easy? Everyone said. Shut up. The Empress chided coldly. What do you mean? Someone subconsciously retorted. But when he turned his head and saw the Empress's beautiful and cold face, he couldn't help but choke. How could he say anything else? How beautiful. How can there be such a beautiful woman in this world? The Empress's exquisite beauty instantly caused everyone to exclaim in surprise, and also caused many people to show expressions of greed. They were all affected by the black gas, becoming bloodthirsty and fearless. Their reverence was greatly reduced. That's mine. One of them immediately reached out to grab the Empress. She was merely a 4th heaven immortal king, so it was naturally easy for them to capture her. Shwa, there was a flash of cold light. The Empress drew her sword and slashed at that person. That person hadn't expected that a 4th heaven celestial king, like the Empress, would actually possess a celestial tool. He thought that a 6th heaven celestial king would be able to suppress the Empress, and he was afraid that someone else would snatch the Empress away first. Thus, he pounced over with his whole body, and didn't just stretch out his hand to grab the Empress. This was because it would be very easy for others to rob him if he did so. Apart from a 9th firmament immortal king, who could withstand the might of an immortal artifact? The sword streaked past, and that person was already sliced in half at the waist. Blood sprayed out, and intestines and other things also spewed out. He was directly killed. Everyone was speechless. That was a sixth heaven celestial king. Yet he was actually killed by a fourth heaven celestial king with a single strike. How could they believe this? They carefully pondered in their minds, and immediately discovered that it wasn't that the Empress was strong enough to insta-kill a sixth heaven celestial king, but rather that the celestial king had been too careless. Moreover, coupled with the celestial tool in the Empress's hand, this had resulted in the insta-kill. That was a celestial tool. Instantly, the gazes of these people became even more scorching. An exquisite beauty with a celestial tool. Who could resist such temptation? This was the cemetery of celestial kings, and there were no rules in the first place. Added with the fact that these people were now affected by the black gas, they naturally became even more unbridled. Ling Han didn't care. The Empress was about to reach the fifth heaven, and coupled with the might of her celestial tool, there were only sixth heaven celestial kings here. Seventh heaven celestial kings could directly cross over the river, so she was more than enough to deal with them. He sat down with peace of mind, and began to play against the elder. This was go, so he took the black position first, and the elder naturally took the white position. Ling Han grunted softly when he placed his piece, because a portion of his divine sense had actually been extracted after he placed his piece. Suddenly, the chess piece had become a part of him. The elder smoked his hookah as he placed his piece. Pa pa pa. In the beginning, both of them placed their pieces very quickly, and only after they had made over 30 moves did their speed slow down. There were more and more things that needed to be calculated. Not only that, but after they had made over 30 consecutive moves, a large portion of Ling Han's divine sense had also been extracted. This would definitely affect his calculation ability and judgment ability. He moved slower and slower, and each move required a considerable amount of time. However, there was an hourglass at the side of the chessboard, and sand would fall in an instant. In about 10 breaths' time, it would all flow out. If he still didn't make a move by the time the sand had all fallen, then he would be directly judged to have lost. Ling Han used enough time, and definitely wouldn't make his move early. He and the elder played casually, and on the other side, the Empress was on a killing spree. Her celestial sword swept through the air, and she was also like a fairy in the clouds, dancing lightly and gracefully, yet her power was enough to steal souls and take lives, causing others to tremble in fear. In less than 15 minutes, the Empress had already killed over a dozen celestial kings, which also caused the other celestial kings to turn green in fear. How could they dare make another move? All of them retreated, maintaining a sufficient distance from her. The Empress stood with her sword, standing guard behind Ling Han. She was stunningly beautiful, and also caused everyone to be incredibly envious. Such an exquisite beauty was actually as gentle as water in front of Ling Han. Who wouldn't be envious? Pa! The elder placed his piece, and the encirclement was formed, eating 7 of Ling Han's chess pieces. Ling Han frowned. His chess pieces had been eaten, and his divine sense had also been slashed, causing his mind to tremble, and it was indescribably uncomfortable. His chess pieces had been eaten, and he would also be injured. No wonder. Even if there were people whose chess skills were above the elders, it was inevitable that they would eat each other's chess pieces in a game of chess. The injury to their divine sense would definitely be affected, and the result would be that they would be more and more disadvantaged, and in the end, it was inevitable that they would lose. Haha, he's been eaten. This is the beginning of defeat. Not many people's divine sense is strong enough to withstand it. Serves him right. The people in the surroundings all mocked coldly. They were too envious. The Empress raised an eyebrow, and a cold glint instantly shot out from her beautiful eyes. She was too proud, so she couldn't be bothered to pursue. But these people actually dared to mock Ling Han. She couldn't tolerate it. The Empress charged out again, 1 person and 1 sword, floating like a fairy. Killing resumed, yet Ling Han was as unmoving as a mountain. He was calm and composed, and casually placed down a chess piece. The elder's response was much faster, and he practically didn't need to think to place a chess piece. If one paid attention, they would discover that the time he used for each move was exactly the same. As they went back and forth, the chessboard was gradually filled with black and white chess pieces, and there was already very little space left for them to place their chess pieces. A smile appeared at the corners of Ling Han's lips. He knew how to play chess, but he wasn't good at it. However, after being with Wall for a long time, he had also learned some of Wall's calculation and analysis abilities, though they were far from being comparable to the original. He had already made the calculations. In this game of chess, he would be able to win at least 3 chess pieces. Chapter 26-29. Although Chang Ji was exaggerating, the people around him couldn't refute him. Miao Yinggui's strength was there for all to see. With the battle prowess of a level 7 martial artist, he alone could kill them until their blood flowed like a river. He's only at the 7th layer of the celestial layer. Someone muttered in a low voice. That beauty was only at the peak of the 4th celestial layer, but she had the combat power of a peak of the 6th celestial layer. Someone at the side nodded. Although it's also because of the help of the immortal artifact, her own strength must have reached the 6th heavenly layer. 2 realms higher, stronger than the Emperor Star. You're even stronger than me. Miao Yinggui's voice rang out. No one had noticed that at some point, he had cut through the lightning and returned. The 2 people who were discussing earlier immediately shut up. Although they were also at the 6th celestial layer, they knew that they were no match for Miao Yingui. Once a conflict broke out, they could only flee. Otherwise, if they fought to the death, they would definitely die. Speak. Miao Yingui snorted. Who can surpass me, Miao Yingui? The 2 of them didn't want to leave, so they told the story of the Empress. You're just relying on the might of an immortal artifact, said Miao Yingui disdainfully. He lowered his voice so that only he could hear it. To be able to possess an immortal artifact, you're either a descendant of a 9th firmament immortal king or a trial taker. His eyes lit up. Even though he was a stunning genius, he didn't have an Empyrean backing him up, so he couldn't have an immortal artifact. His eyes turned red. And as for these 2 people praising the Empress's beauty to the point it was rare in the world, he didn't believe them in the slightest. Before entering the cemetery of celestial kings, he'd been surrounded by countless beauties, and he'd seen all sorts of extraordinary beauties. Only the bumpkins in the immortal king's cemetery had truly seen too few women, and they might be praised to be peerlessly beautiful if they were slightly good-looking. The 2 people you spoke of, are they in that ball of lightning? He pointed at the bridge and asked. After getting an affirmative answer, he shook his head. Even with his strength, it was impossible for him to withstand such an attack for too long, let alone thousands of years. Haha, those 2 must be spreading false rumors. How can a mere 4th firmament immortal king do it? I'd like to. He strode up the bridge. You can't, someone hurriedly said. If you don't win the game and rush onto the bridge, you'll only be thrown into the river to await death. What do I, Miao Yingui, have to fear? Miao Yingui strode forward. He didn't believe the nonsense these people were spouting. He quickly arrived at the edge of the bridge. After a slight hesitation, he still took a step forward. Xiao, lightning flashed, and the old man had already strangely appeared on the bridge, grabbing at Miao Yingui. Why would I be afraid of you? Miao Yingui sneered and raised his palm to meet the attack. Bam! The old man's large hand descended, and Miao Yingui's counterattack was unable to withstand a single blow. He was taken down without any suspense. Ninth heavenly immortal king, he said through gritted teeth. The difference in their cultivation levels was too great. If he fought against such an expert head-on, he would naturally be suppressed. Yet the old man did not open his mouth at all. With a casual fling, Miao Yingui was thrown into the river. Miao Yingui's body exploded with a bright light, and he actually charged out of the river. He stood in mid-air, his eyes filled with hatred. He actually didn't die. Unbelievable. As expected of a prodigy, he's too strong. Everyone exclaimed in shock. This was the first person they had seen thrown into the river and not die. Yet Miao Yingui did not look pleased at all. When he had been thrown into the river, his cultivation level had been sealed. Originally, he could only wait for death, but he had a secret treasure that he had obtained from an ancient site. It could only be activated when he was in a life-or-death crisis, and it could only be used once. Now that this secret treasure was activated, it meant that he had already died once. He had not obtained anything, yet had wasted a life-saving treasure. How could he be happy? He sat down cross-legged beside the river. Now he wanted to obtain a celestial tool even more. Otherwise he really would not be satisfied. 100 years, 200 years, finally, the lightning became weaker and weaker, and Ling Han and the Empress appeared. As if sensing something, Miao Yingwei immediately opened his eyes. His eyes swept over and suddenly, an expression of shock appeared on his face. There were actually two people in this ball of lightning, and they were only at the fourth heaven and fifth heaven. This was too inconceivable. How did they survive? Previously, Miao Yingwei did not know how long the two of them had stayed in the lightning, and he would not believe what others said. But just he had sat here for 200 years. 200 years? He knew that he definitely could not endure for so long. However, when he saw the Empress's appearance clearly, his eyes involuntarily burst with light. Too beautiful. How could there be such a beautiful woman? He laughed loudly, suddenly feeling that losing a life-saving secret treasure was nothing. I can break through to the fifth heaven, the Empress said. In these 2,000 years, she had been absorbing the power of lightning to aid the advancement of her cultivation level, and she was originally at the peak of the fourth heaven, so she naturally had the qualifications to break through to the fifth heaven. Ling Han nodded. He had also reached the late stage of the fifth heaven, and if he could do this 2 more times, he should be able to reach the peak of the fifth heaven and break through to the sixth heaven. The Empress released her cultivation level, and instantly, thunderclouds rolled over in the sky. She was preparing to undergo the tribulation. Miao Yingwei had originally planned to go forward, but seeing that the Empress was actually going to undergo the tribulation, he could only helplessly stop. However, the Empress could not be disturbed temporarily, but another person could. He stared at Ling Han and opened his mouth saying, "Brat, come here." The other was still standing on the bridge, and he did not dare to go up again. He had already used up his life-saving treasure, and if his cultivation level was also sealed and thrown into the river, he could only wait for death. Ling Han was surprised and walked towards Miao Yingwei. How had he attracted hatred again? "I told you to come over, did you hear me?" Miao Yingwei rebuked. Ling Han shook his head. "Idiot," he muttered. Seeking death. Miao Yingwei humphed. Shua, with a shake of his right hand, a long sword had already appeared, and then he slashed out at Ling Han. The sword chi turned into a white tiger, roaring as it charged at Ling Han. Ling Han frowned. This person had first rebuked him, and then made a move for no reason. Did he think that his temper was very good? His feet moved, and he had already leaped down from the bridge. He shot out a punch, and pung! The ferocious tiger formed from sword chi was instantly destroyed. Miao Yingwei's eyes narrowed. A fifth heaven celestial king was actually able to disperse his sword chi with a single punch. This brat really did have some ability. However, he did not care. That was only a casual strike, and was not his true battle prowess at all. "I'll give you a chance. Immediately scram, and never ever see this fairy again. Otherwise, I will definitely cut off your head," he said calmly. When he said this fairy, he glanced at the Empress. At this moment, the Empress had already begun to battle the heavenly tribulation. Even under such circumstances, she was still extremely beautiful, and could cause one's heart to pound. Ling Han gave an "oh." So it was the Empress's exquisite beauty that had attracted hatred for him. This was something that could not be avoided from the moment he had formed ties with the Empress. He shook his head, smiled, and said, "And which clan are you from, using the name of your father's generation to suppress me?" Chapter 26:30. Miao Yingwei revealed a look of disdain. "I'm invincible on my own. Why do I need to rely on my father's generation?" He said these words with an air of arrogance. Oh, Ling Han was slightly surprised. He had really not met anyone here who was as confident as Miao Yingwei. He was not like those spoiled brats. Though they were incredibly arrogant, they had a kind of inferiority complex in their hearts, because they were actually just prisoners. Could it be that Ling Han smiled? You're a trial taker who came here from the outside, right? Miao Yinggui's expression changed when he heard this. Even if he was extremely confident, in reality, he was only at the 6th level, and his combat strength was at most at the peak of the 7th level. If he encountered an 8th or 9th level immortal king, he would definitely be defeated. If his identity as a trial taker was exposed, he would definitely be attacked by everyone in the cemetery of immortals. Then he would have no choice but to hide in a corner. Nonsense, he said coldly and attacked again, not giving Ling Han a chance to speak. Ling Han laughed. He knew he had guessed correctly. He casually counterattacked and easily resolved Miao Yinggui's attack. How could a 7th level attack be taken seriously by him now? Miao Yingui attacked again and again, but he became more and more shocked. Ling Han was just casually blocking, but his defense was stable, and he completely resolved his attacks. This made him have to admit that the other party's strength was not inferior to his. How could such a monstrous person appear in a place like the Cemetery of Immortals? A thought flashed in his mind. So you're also an outsider. There were countless geniuses in the boundless world, so it was possible for someone more monstrous than him to appear. Ling Han smiled faintly, and his right hand pressed out, grabbing towards Miao Yingui. He circulated the Gui water raging lightning, and used Miao Yingui as a sparring partner to hone his control of this secret technique. Miao Yingui attacked with all his strength, and the lightning wrapped in the laws of water was too terrifying. If he held back, he would be blasted into pieces in a matter of minutes. It had to be said that although Miao Yinggui's combat strength was not too strong, he had the qualifications of an emperor's star. Ling Han suppressed his strength and lowered himself to the same level as his opponent. This was the best way to temper himself, instead of relying on his strength to crush his opponent. As a result, the two of them were locked in battle. Ling Han continued to gain enlightenment. He began to fuse the greenwood raging lightning and the Gui water raging lightning. Thunder of the 5 elements was the strongest aspect of this secret technique. With the help of an emperor's star, Ling Han was rapidly increasing his comprehension of this secret technique. How could Miao Yingui not come out? However, Ling Han's attacks came wave after wave like a tsunami, making it impossible for him to stop. Otherwise, he would be killed immediately. He felt extremely vexed. The dignified emperor star of the world's #1 martial institution, an overlord who had the qualifications to become an empyrean in the future, had actually been reduced to a sparring partner. How could he not be angry? But didn't he ask for it? Who the hell are you? Miao Yingui roared. The #1 martial academy under the heavens had gathered countless monstrous geniuses from different planes. It was simply impossible to guess the other party's identity. Only now do you think to ask who I am, Ling Han said coldly. This person obviously had designs on the Empress, so he had already sentenced the other to death. We are both members of the world's #1 martial institution, so there is no need to be so overbearing, Miao Yingui said. Being able to say such words, he had actually already admitted defeat. How could Ling Han possibly hold back? He calmly said, I will suppress my strength to the same level as yours. If you can withstand 100 moves, I will spare your life. You are underestimating me too much. Miao Yingui was furious. He admitted that he was inferior to Ling Han, but under the circumstances that their strength was the same, he still couldn't withstand 100 moves from Ling Han. What kind of joke was this? Ling Han smiled calmly and struck out with his palm again. His power instantly increased countless times. He had already fused the greenwood raging lightning and Gui water raging lightning together, forming the water with lightning. 3 regulations fused together. How could this not be terrifying? Miao Yingui was instantly suppressed. No matter how prodigious you were, how could you match an empyrean technique? Not to mention Miao Yingui, even a descendant of an empyrean might not be a match. Why? Empyrean techniques might not be superior, but not all empyrean techniques were suitable for celestial kings to cultivate. For example, Heavenly Venerable Feng Qing's fish dragon technique. Even a 9th heaven overlord, like the Imperial Void Celestial King, was barely able to use it. So it was naturally even more impossible for a low-level celestial king to use an empyrean technique. Thus, the 9 transformations heaven scroll in water with lightning might not be considered top-notch in the Empyrean level. But in the Celestial King level, they were extremely powerful. Miao Yingwei was battered and exhausted. Even if their strength was equal, facing the power of an Empyrean technique, he would only be at a disadvantage. Want to suppress me within 100 moves? You are really dreaming, he said. Being at a disadvantage was one thing, but he was confident that he could withstand 300 moves, or even more. Is that so? Ling Han laughed, and once again activated the 9 transformations heaven scroll. 2 Empyrean techniques. If the indestructible heaven scroll was included, then Ling Han had a total of 3 Empyrean techniques. Although only the indestructible heaven scroll was complete, one person had 3 Empyrean techniques, and the key was that he had grasped and could use them. This was too terrifying. Miao Yingwei instantly released a muffled groan. With the support of the 9 transformations heaven scroll, Ling Han's battle prowess instantly increased by 3 to 4 times. And he was even more unable to match him. Unable to withstand 100 moves. Miao Yingwei was bleeding, and Ling Han had activated 2 Empyrean techniques. This battle prowess was too terrifying, and if the battle continued he would die. He gritted his teeth, suddenly turned around and fled. Xiao. Ling Han activated the regulations of space, and instantly blocked his path. Humph, you have now already used power that surpasses mine, Miao Yingwei rebuked. Otherwise he could not possibly be caught. Ling Han smiled calmly. The prerequisite is that you cannot escape. The condition that he had set out was a fair battle. And since Miao Yingwei did not abide by the agreement, he naturally would not add any more restrictions on himself. We are both disciples of the academy, so why do you have to force me? Miao Yingwei changed his method, begging for mercy without any dignity. Don't you feel ashamed? Ling Han smirked coldly, and did not hold back anymore. His hands were like axes, and each strike was a heavy blow. 2 Empyrean techniques were activated at the same time, and the power was extraordinarily great. Miao Yingwei struggled, but how could he possibly be a match for Ling Han? He could not even escape, and was soon hacked to death. Ling Han did not have any mercy. Once his bottom line was touched, he only had one word, and that was to kill. He looked at the Empress, and his gaze instantly softened. The Empress had already drawn out her celestial sword, and was very calm when facing the heavenly tribulation. There was no need to worry at all. In the surroundings everyone was stunned. So it turned out that Ling Han and Miao Yingwei were both outsiders who had come here to train. Their gazes immediately became sinister. As prisoners, what they hated the most were those who had come here to train. However, Ling Han's strength was too strong, and they did not dare to match him at all. They could only suppress it in their hearts. However, once Ling Han left, they would expose Ling Han's identity as an outsider, drawing out countless elites. No matter what, they had to kill him to pieces. A day later, the heavenly tribulation passed, and the Empress descended. Her delicate body was twined with 5 different colors, exuding a powerful aura. Let's go. Ling Han did not take the people in the surroundings seriously at all. He was getting closer and closer to the 6th heaven. Even if his identity was exposed, so what? He was completely unafraid. Chapter 2631. Ling Han and the Empress became more and more interested in this Yuan ancient tomb. There was a heavenly venerate technique hidden here, and it was something they could cultivate now. It had extraordinary significance. They continued to venture deeper, and the news that the 2 of them were outsiders began to spread like wildfire. Just a few days after they became outsiders, Ling Han and the Empress were ambushed. They were 3 7th heaven celestial kings. Their eyes were cold and murderous. What they hated the most were foreign cultivators, who used them as stepping stones to improve their cultivation. Ling Han stood still and glanced at them. He couldn't help but laugh. Just the 3 of you are not enough. How dare you? The 3 attacked together, suppressing Ling Han. The Empress attacked with her sword. Shua. Cold light flashed. She was now at the 5th heaven, and with the power of her celestial artifact, her battle prowess was comparable to a peak 7th heaven. This strike was extremely terrifying. The 3 7th heaven celestial kings were shocked. They hurriedly scattered to avoid the attack. Then they launched a counterattack. Spiritual attack. Wang. 3 terrifying spiritual attacks came. The Empress couldn't help but grunt softly, a pained expression on her pretty face. The difference in cultivation level was too great. Such a spiritual attack was enough to affect her greatly. Miao Yingwei hadn't used this secret technique before, because he had just entered the Yuan ancient tomb. He hadn't been affected by the black gas for a long time, so he hadn't cultivated such a secret technique. However, these 3 were different. They had entered the Yuan ancient tomb long ago. Not only were they affected by the black gas, but they had also killed many celestial kings and plundered the black gas in their bodies. This made their spiritual attacks more destructive to the divine sense. Just a 5th heaven? The 3 celestial kings sneered. They wanted to take advantage of the situation and defeat the Empress in one fell swoop. Their eyes were filled with greed because the Empress had an celestial artifact. The Empress didn't panic. She moved around and attacked with her sword. With the power of the celestial artifact, the 3 7th heaven celestial kings didn't dare to go too far. If they were too close, they might be injured by the celestial artifact. However, as long as they kept attacking with spiritual attacks from a safe distance, they could still suppress the Empress. Ling Han sighed and said, 3 7th firmament immortal kings besieging a 5th firmament. Aren't they embarrassed? Old Li, kill that punk, said a 7th firmament immortal king in purple robes. All right. The black-robed immortal king nodded. He turned and charged at Ling Han. He refused to believe that Ling Han could be so monstrous as to fight a 7th firmament immortal king as a 5th firmament immortal king. Meanwhile, the purple-robed celestial king and the azure-robed celestial king continued to attack the Empress together. They felt that this was a troublesome opponent, and they needed to work together. Surrender immediately. Hand over the immortal artifact, and I can spare your life. The purple-robed immortal king spoke, his eyes flashed with greed. He wanted the immortal treasure and this beauty. The Empress didn't answer, and merely waved her sword in a slash. She couldn't be bothered to deal with these 2 stinky bugs. You guys seem to have forgotten about me. Ling Han's voice rang out. What? This nobody is still alive? The purple-robed celestial king and the azure-robed celestial king charged at Ling Han at the same time, but they immediately gasped, and even their attacks stopped. The black-robed celestial king had already fallen to the ground. There was a bloody hole in his back that was gurgling with blood, and his life aura had completely disappeared. If this was in the outside world, then the death of a celestial king would cause heaven and earth to mourn. But here, a celestial king's death didn't matter. He was just like any random stray dog or cat. Gasp, wasn't this a little too fast? It was already unimaginable that a 7th firmament immortal king was no match for a 5th firmament immortal king. And it was unimaginable that he had died so quickly. That was a 7th firmament immortal king. If he wanted to run, even a 9th firmament immortal king that had recently broken through wouldn't be able to stop him. Did this brat use some powerful killing weapon? Otherwise, they really wouldn't be able to accept this. Come, who will be my opponent? 1-on-1. At least it'll be relatively fair, Ling Han said with a smile. The purple-robed celestial king stepped forward. He immediately sent out a mental attack, and then said, I'll do it. Wang, the mental attack arrived, and Ling Han couldn't help but frown. He felt a pain in his head, as if it were being pricked by needles. He didn't know how many times, but there was nothing he could do. This kind of attack ignored distance, and it was impossible to guard against. But that was all. He had already completed the Divine Sense section of the Indestructible Heavens scroll, so he was fine after the pain. His mind was vast, and it was complete and flawless. It's impolite not to reciprocate. Take a punch from me as well. Ling Han's figure charged out, and he directly punched out at the purple-robed celestial king. The purple-robed celestial king humphed, and also punched out, meeting Ling Han's punch. As long as Ling Han didn't use a powerful killing weapon, he had nothing to fear. In his opinion, Ling Han must have used some kind of 9th heaven-level secret treasure to kill the black-robed celestial king. Otherwise, how could a mere 5th firmament celestial king be so ferocious? Pung! Their fists collided, instantly forming a shock wave that rippled out in all directions. Their movements all paused, and then the purple-robed celestial king's fist instantly shattered. The shock wave surged up, and his arm also exploded, white bone and flesh flying out. Pa 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 pa. Only when his entire arm exploded into pieces did the shock wave finally stop. The purple-robed celestial king's entire right arm was gone, and blood was still gushing out. On the other side, the green-robed celestial king was already stunned. Fuck. A single punch destroyed the arm of a seventh heaven celestial king. What kind of terrifying destructive power was this? How can you be so powerful? The purple-robed celestial king finally understood why the black-robed celestial king had been killed by Ling Han so quickly. It wasn't that this person had some powerful killing weapon, but that he himself was a powerful killing weapon. Cultivate well in your next life and you'll know. Ling Han charged out and sent out another punch. The distance was too close, and there was no way to dodge. The purple-robed celestial king could only brace himself to receive it, and send out his left fist to meet Ling Han's. Pung! Without any suspense, his arm was also instantly destroyed, and he became an armless person. This was a trivial matter for an immortal king. His body was full of vitality, and he could easily regrow it. But the problem was that the purple-robed celestial king didn't have the time to regrow his arm. Ling Han's third punch came. The purple-robed celestial king raised his left leg to meet the attack. His left leg was also destroyed, and he became a one-legged person. He didn't dare to receive it again. His remaining right leg kicked out, and he was about to escape. Heavens, this fifth heaven celestial king was too terrifying. He wasn't someone he could kill. Ling Han shook his head. You still want to run now? Are you in a rush? If the purple-robed celestial king turned and fled the moment he saw him, it would be difficult for Ling Han to stop him even if he grasped the spatial law. But now the two of them were so close. If he let the purple-robed celestial king escape, it would be a joke. Ling Han instantly caught up to him and threw out a punch. Puffed. The purple-robed celestial king vomited blood. He staggered, and when he slowly turned around, he saw a bloody hole in his chest. His heart had already been destroyed. He lowered his head to his chest, and then looked up at Ling Han. His eyes were filled with disbelief. A mighty seventh heaven expert actually died just like that? Just as this thought flashed through his mind, he crashed to the ground, and a cloud of dust rose. Chapter 2633. A mere fifth heaven celestial king. Quickly drop your sword and surrender. The eighth heaven celestial king stood with his hands clasped behind his back, appearing mighty and domineering. Of course, he had the right to do so. He was an eighth heaven celestial king, only one tier away from the peak battle prowess of the celestial king's cemetery. Of course, he had the right to be arrogant and domineering. The empress couldn't be bothered to reply. With a celestial tool in hand, she wanted to fight. I'm Zhang Tianyan, the eighth heaven celestial king said. You're quite talented, so I'll give you a chance to live. As long as you become my disciple, I'll spare your life, and even teach you supreme mystical powers. He was greedy for the empress's beauty. Taking her as a disciple was fake, and keeping her in his house was real. The empress rebuked, and took the initiative to attack. You overestimate yourself, Zhang Tianyan sneered, and pressed out with his palm. Wang. A terrifying pressure pressed down, and the regulations materialized, pressing down on the empress. Peng the empress was instantly sent flying. Although she was very powerful, she couldn't compare to Ling Han. How could she match an eighth heaven celestial king with a fifth heaven celestial king's cultivation? Thankfully, the celestial tools sliced through the regulations, and she wasn't too heavily injured. Where's that brat? Zhang Tianyan looked around. He was afraid that Ling Han would directly flee when he attacked. That really might allow him to escape. The empress didn't answer, and grabbed with her left hand. Endless mist and lightning surged over, and grass sprouted from the ground, growing desperately. Zhang Tianyan looked slightly surprised. The regulations of water, wood, and lightning were rapidly being extracted and fused into the empress's hand. Logically speaking, a fifth heaven celestial king definitely couldn't condense so many regulations. And this was already at the seventh heaven level. Interesting. His eyes lit up slightly, This girl actually grasped a secret technique, and it seems to be very extraordinary. He was greatly moved. He could obtain a beauty and a secret technique. This was really a rewarding trip. In comparison, even if he didn't capture that man, it didn't matter. In any case, there were other celestial kings that would attack. I'd like to see how extraordinary this secret technique is, he said in his mind. With that thought in mind, the Empress had already completely condensed 3 types of regulations. The Gui Water Furious Lightning and the Greenwood Violent Lightning fused together, turning into the Water and Wood Lightning. A greenish-black lightning spear appeared in the Empress's hand. It really is extraordinary. If I had been the slightest bit careless with this attack, it could even have torn apart my defense, Zhang Tianyan murmured, his eyes even brighter. He had entered here for the sake of obtaining the remaining 6 parts of the 9 Transformations Heaven Scroll. But now he discovered that the secret technique on the Empress was not the slightest bit inferior. He had profited greatly. Sizzle, the Empress moved, tossing out a lightning spear that shot swiftly towards Zhang Tianyan. Zhang Tianyan was conceited and powerful, so he naturally didn't bother to dodge. He reached out and grabbed the lightning spear. The great path wrapped around his hand, and it was almost as if no technique could touch it. However, he clearly overestimated his own strength, and also underestimated the power of this Empyrean technique. Even though he grabbed the lightning spear, the lightning radiance wreaked havoc, still making his right hand explode, blood flowing out. This could only be considered a minor injury, but the attack of a 5th Heaven Celestial King could actually cause an 8th Heaven Celestial King to bleed. This in itself was an incredibly rare thing. However, Zhang Tianyan wasn't angered. Instead, he was delighted. The might of the lightning spear was too great, and it also made him extremely pleasantly surprised. If he obtained this secret technique, then wouldn't he be able to use it to intimidate 9th Heaven Celestial Kings? He laughed loudly, and his figure flashed as he charged towards the Empress. Since he had already seen the might of this secret technique, he had also lost his patience. Now he wanted to take down the Empress and obtain both her and the technique. The Empress was truly proud, but she wasn't stupid. Since an 8th Heaven Celestial King had displayed his might, how could she possibly take it head-on? She hurriedly dodged. You're really dreaming if you want to escape from my hands. Zhang Tianyan laughed loudly. His large hand pressed down, and everything within a radius of 5 kilometers was completely under his control. Even the regulations themselves had to bow their heads to him. An 8th Heaven Celestial King was just this domineering. The Empress was cold, and the celestial tool in her hand slashed out, forcefully carving out a path. And a celestial tool, Zhang Tianyan faltered, and then laughed loudly. He was really overjoyed. His move this time wasn't killing 2 birds with 1 stone, but rather 3. He actually managed to obtain another celestial tool. Was this a supreme opportunity that the heavens wanted to bestow upon him? Where do you think you're going? He moved again, drawing out the regulations of heaven and earth to form multiple pillars, wanting to trap the Empress. The Empress brandished her celestial tool to open up a path, while her left hand continuously shot out water and wood lightning at Zhang Tianyan, forcibly slowing down the latter's speed. They exchanged blows, and Zhang Tianyan discovered to his surprise that he actually couldn't do anything to the Empress. It wasn't that the Empress was heaven-defying, but rather that the celestial tool in her hand could cut through anything. Even the cage formed from his regulations was easily cut through, and more importantly, he also had reservations when he attacked. He wasn't willing to injure the Empress, and wanted to capture a beautiful and flawless woman. That was why the Empress could dodge so easily. After a few times, Zhang Tianyan gradually lost his patience. In his eyes, the Empress was no longer a person, but rather a treasure trove. He had to obtain it, and he couldn't share it with anyone else. If she was wounded, so be it. In any case, as long as the foundation of a celestial king wasn't damaged, any injury would be able to recover very quickly. With that thought, his attacks became countless times fiercer, causing the Empress to appear to be in a difficult position. It couldn't be helped. The gap in cultivation level was too wide, and it was already very impressive that the Empress could last until now. If you don't want to suffer anymore, quickly surrender, Zhang Tianyan said coldly. For a celestial king like him, as long as his mind was set, it was definitely impossible for it to be shaken. No matter how pitiful the empress was, it wouldn't be able to soften his heart. The empress still didn't answer. What right did this kind of smelly bug have to make her speak? Stubborn, Zhang Tianyan humphed. His palms were like axes and slashed out at the empress. Even if he was wary of the might of a celestial tool, and didn't dare to get too close, his cultivation level was at the 8th heaven, and each palm strike was as heavy as a mountain, forcefully crushing regulations, and also making it incredibly difficult for the empress to draw out regulations. This was the strength of a high-level celestial king. With a higher cultivation level, they could directly draw out regulations, and that low-level celestial king wouldn't be able to use regulations, directly reaching the level of the severing mundane tier. The empress could only use her celestial tool to slash. This was not affected by Zhang Tianyan, and could slash through everything. Sit obediently for me. Zhang Tianyan laughed loudly. He had already completely gained the upper hand, and pressed down with the palm strike, wanting to disintegrate all of the empress's battle prowess. But when his palm strike landed, he discovered that his speed had actually become extraordinarily slow. Regulations of time. He was surprised. With his great ability, the empress shouldn't be able to draw out any regulations, so where had this regulations of time come from? Furthermore, she was able to use the regulations of time, even though she hadn't reached the 9th heaven. Just how nature-defying was this beautiful girl's luck? Xiao, the empress took the chance to slash through the seal, and once again escaped with her life. This was because she had activated the grand cosmic everlasting body, and her own physique naturally couldn't possibly be sealed by Zhang Tianyan. Otherwise, it would mean that she had already fallen into the hands of the other. I don't believe it. Could it be that I can't capture a mere 5th heaven like you? Zhang Tianyan was also really angered. A dignified 8th heaven celestial king had made a move, and actually still hadn't captured her after so long. Oh, is that so? Ling Han's cold voice rang out. Chapter 2634. Ling Han studied the patterns in the magma for a while, and after discovering that he couldn't maintain the circulation of the indestructible heaven scroll, he flew out and saw Zhang Tianyan chasing after the empress. This naturally made him furious, and he immediately flashed out, chasing after Zhang Tianyan. Zhang Tianyan was slightly startled, not expecting that brat to actually hide in the magma. This magma was very terrifying, with 2 types of rules, fire and thunder flowing. Even a 9th heaven celestial king wouldn't deliberately run in. There was no benefit, and it would just be a waste of their own power. Why did a mere 5th heaven celestial king run in? I'll beat you up. Ling Han didn't say anything else, and directly charged over. His hands formed fists, and the rules wrapped around them as he erupted with full power. Not only did the rules wrap around his fists, but he also activated his physical arts and 2 celestial venerable treasure techniques, endlessly boosting his battle prowess. This naturally made his attacks extremely violent. As he punched out, his entire person was like a humanoid dragon, exuding an extremely terrifying aura. Zhang Tianyan originally didn't take Ling Han seriously. A mere 5th heaven celestial king, without a celestial tool in hand, he didn't need to take him seriously. However, when Ling Han attacked, he was shocked. This battle prowess was comparable to the early stage of the 8th heaven. No, the middle stage. This was crazy. A 5th heaven celestial king could actually display the battle prowess of the middle stage of the 8th heaven, without external help. Was this heaven-defying? According to this, as long as this brat reached the 6th heaven, wouldn't he be able to stand at the peak of the celestial path, and stand as an equal to a 9th heaven celestial king? This man and woman were too extraordinary. No wonder they dared to come here to train. There was probably a celestial venerable behind them. However, this was the cemetery of celestial kings, and celestial venerables would never set foot here. This was the consensus reached by all celestial venerables. Even if he killed Ling Han, he wouldn't be afraid. No celestial venerables would enter here to hunt him down. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Zhang Tianyan sneered. He was at the late stage of the 8th heaven. Although he was only slightly stronger than Ling Han, it was enough. He also charged towards Ling Han, slashing with both hands like a true dragon or an ancient beast. Ling Han laughed loudly and punched out with both fists. Bang bang bang, the two powerhouses clashed. Every time their fists collided, the force of the collision would shake the heavens, as if it was going to collapse the universe. After exchanging more than 10 blows in one breath, Zhang Tianyan couldn't help but be overwhelmed with shock. Sure enough, he did have the upper hand in terms of strength, but Ling Han's physique was too terrifying. Although he would be forced back every time, the blood flow in his body was like a dragon or a tiger, and it was not chaotic at all. If it was someone else, even if it was an 8th heaven middle stage immortal king, his chi and blood would definitely be in turmoil, and his combat strength would suffer. It was even possible that he would be knocked to the ground. Ling Han was clearly at a disadvantage, but his battle prowess wasn't affected at all. This was too inconceivable. How could there be such a person? Ling Han was enraged, and he waved his fists like rain. Stinky old man, how dare you hurt my wife? I'm going to beat you to a pulp. Zhang Tianyan was gloomy. He had no intention of harming the empress either. He merely wanted to take her down. Moreover, a 5th heaven immortal king actually said that he would beat him up. How could he accept this? Brat, you're too arrogant. He took the initiative to change his move. With a shake of his right hand, a small golden pagoda appeared. As soon as it appeared, it spun and hung above his head. The golden pagoda emitted a treasure aura that was visible to the naked eye. Every wisp of it was extremely heavy, suppressing even the regulations. This wasn't a celestial tool, but its materials were also extraordinary. Furthermore, it had been tempered day and night by him with his 8th heaven cultivation, so its might was really extraordinary. It could be said that not only was it not weaker than his, but it was even slightly stronger. Die! Facing Ling Han, Zhang Tianyan didn't have the slightest scruple. Ling Han was the target that he wanted to kill in the first place. He shot out a punch, and his own strength combined with the treasure aura of the golden pagoda, its might skyrocketed. Ling Han gave a loud roar, and once again threw out a punch. Pung! This time, Ling Han was far from being a match for him. He was sent flying by a single punch, and the bones all over his body made cracking sounds. If it weren't for the fact that his physique was incredibly tough, it was likely that many of his bones would have been broken by this blow. Can't even withstand a single blow. Zhang Tianyan smirked coldly. He didn't care at all that he had already drawn out a celestial tool, and Ling Han was still fighting barehanded. A loss was a loss, and a win was a win. Everything else was just an excuse. He gave a long roar, and took advantage of his victory to pursue. Ling Han wiped the corner of his mouth. He knew that the difference in cultivation level was still too great. In a situation where he was barehanded, he could only match an unarmed 8th heaven celestial king. Once his opponent drew out a celestial tool, if he was still like this, he would be at a great disadvantage. Damn old man, you're asking for trouble. He drew out the divine demon sword. A cold light flashed, and it was as if a 9th heaven celestial king had appeared, exuding a fierce and domineering aura. After swallowing enough divine metal, even if the divine demon sword hadn't reached the level of a heavenly venerable, it was far above divine metal. At least in terms of might, it was already comparable to a 9th heaven celestial king. Zhang Tianyan was shocked. Another celestial tool. Fuck, how extravagant. He was an 8th heaven celestial king, but up until now, he only had a celestial tool. However, this man and woman were only 5th heaven, yet they both had celestial tools. In comparison, he, an 8th heaven celestial king, was too shabby. People who came from outside were indeed different. They had a heavenly venerable backing them, and even celestial tools could be casually taken out. I'll kill you. Ling Han moved with his sword, and slashed wildly at Zhang Tianyan. You think you're worthy? Zhang Tianyan was almost angered to death. It should be known that he was the one who had come to kill these two outsiders. He drew out the precious chi of the golden pagoda, and shot out a punch. The chi transformed into a golden battle wolf that pounced at Ling Han. He was afraid of the might of a celestial tool, and did not dare to fight in close combat. Pooh! Ling Han's sword slashed out, and the golden battle wolf was immediately sliced into two. Under the terrifying destructive power of the divine demon sword, the golden battle wolf could not possibly have the chance to fuse and attack again, and was directly annihilated. Zhang Tianyan was shocked. It was not that he had not exchanged blows with celestial tools before, but in the hands of the Empress, while celestial tools were powerful, they did not have this kind of might. Ling Han attacked aggressively. With a shake of his left hand, the lightning of water and wood was activated, transforming into an electric spear that smashed at Zhang Tianyan. He had long since circulated the 9 transformations heaven scroll. Though it could not achieve the greatest effect, the power of the 3 scriptures combined into one was already quite extraordinary. The electric spear and celestial sword danced, and he completely held the initiative. Zhang Tianyan was helpless. He only had world-shaking strength, yet did not dare to clash head-on with Ling Han. Even if he was an 8th heaven celestial king, it would definitely not end well for him to clash head-on with a celestial tool. A dignified 8th heaven celestial king was actually suppressed by a 5th heaven celestial king. This was very inconceivable, yet it was really happening. Damn it! Damn it! Zhang Tianyan cursed. This was something that he had not expected at all before he made his move. The strength of this man and woman was too strong, especially Ling Han. He was so strong that he could not be reasoned with. You actually used a pagoda-shaped precious tool. All the more I cannot spare you. Ling Han's eyes swept over the golden pagoda above Zhang Tianyan's head, his killing intent burning even more. Though the black pagoda had already been snatched away, Ling Han was still deeply affected, and hated pagoda-shaped precious tools the most. Zhang Tianyan had a feeling that he did not know what to say. Fuck, I forged the precious tool into the shape of a pagoda. And it's also bothering you? Reading on a cell phone is more refreshing. Chapter 2635. I'll beat you up. Ling Han held the sword in his right hand, but his left hand was ever-changing. Sometimes it was a palm, sometimes it was a fist, sometimes it was a wave of his hand, and sometimes it was a lightning spear. He had already walked his own path. Martial art was not limited to the form, but moved according to the heart. Zhang Tianyan, on the other hand, was suffering unspeakably. Ling Han's attacks seemed to be disorderly, yet they were strangely powerful. It was as if he had the upper hand in terms of strength, yet he was at a disadvantage when it came to fighting, which he couldn't understand. However, he was an 8th firmament immortal king after all. When he saw Ling Han's calm face glow, as though an immortal spirit was about to walk out of his body, he could not help but blurt out, "You found your own path." He clearly knew that if he wanted to become an Empyrean, the most basic and most important step was to forge his own path. Every celestial master was unique. Even if there were 3 celestial masters under Lin Luo's tutelage, the final step was not taken by oneself. A master could only play the role of a guide, but could not make the younger generation follow in their footsteps. For a moment he was extremely jealous. Although walking one's own path didn't necessarily mean that one would become an Empyrean, the most critical step had already been taken, and the greatest obstacle to breaking through to the Empyrean realm had been swept away. Such a person actually came to the cemetery of immortal kings? "You're courting death," he said coldly. His heart was filled with jealousy, and he wanted nothing more than to immediately kill Ling Han. "You're courting death by running over here. And you even injured my wife. Even tearing you apart won't be enough to quell my hatred," roared Ling Han. His sword flashed with boundless light. He no longer held back, and he pushed his combat strength to its peak. Zhang Tianyan didn't believe that Ling Han's battle prowess could be maintained at such a high level. Otherwise, it would be too unreasonable. Thus, he did not retreat even half a step, and continued to clash head-on with Ling Han. He wanted to blast Ling Han out of his current state as soon as possible. At that time, he would harvest Ling Han's head, and then capture the Empress. His gains would be astonishing. Of course, opportunities were accompanied by dangers. Right now, the greatest opportunity was right in front of him. So wasn't it normal to be in danger? Wang, he activated his trump card. Psychic Blast. This was too annoying. Even if Ling Han was prepared, it was useless. He only felt a pain in his head as he was hit. I have no choice but to admit that you're very powerful and incomparably monstrous. But in the end, you're still too inexperienced. Your low realm is a weakness that you can't change. Zhang Tianyan seized the opportunity to attack. How rich was his battle experience. Once he found an opening, he would fiercely attack and kill his opponent in one breath. Ling Han sneered and slashed out with his sword. What? Zhang Tianyan turned pale with fright. In his opinion, under the influence of his spiritual attack, even if Ling Han's divine soul was not injured, he would still be stagnant for half a breath's time, which was enough for him to kill him. This sword strike was far beyond his expectations. He quickly tapped his feet, wanting to dodge the attack, but it was already too late. Poo blood splattered. Zhang Tianyan quickly retreated 100 zhang. His empty left arm had been cut off from the shoulder, and only fresh blood was gushing out. Good, 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 he said through gritted teeth. He hadn't thought that he, the hunter, would instead fall for the prey's trap and be cheated of his experience. I said I'd kill you. Ling Han leaped out and slashed again. He would indeed still be affected by the spiritual attack, but now it only caused him a stab of pain. It was as if his physical body had been cut by a sword. It would hurt, but with a strong will he could completely endure it. Zhang Tianyan used the spiritual attack again, and his hands turned into fists, similarly attacking endlessly. Ling Han felt his mind boil, and was extremely uncomfortable under the spiritual attack. But the more it was like this, the more violent his fighting spirit became. He chased after Zhang Tianyan, and slashed fiercely, determined to kill this opponent. Zhang Tianyan didn't have such a strong fighting spirit. Although his spiritual attack caused considerable damage to Ling Han, he himself was also pushed close by Ling Han. Even if the divine demon sword didn't directly strike him, the sharp sword chi was still enough to make him suffer. What was more important was that his left arm was cut off directly by the divine demon sword. Endless murderous aura also entered his body through the wound, and was currently wreaking havoc. The might of a celestial tool couldn't be underestimated, not to mention that the might of the divine demon sword far surpassed that of a celestial tool. Zhang Tianyan was an 8th heaven celestial king, yes, but he couldn't possibly withstand the destructive power of the divine demon sword. If he had time to sit down and heal, he could still force the murderous aura of the divine demon sword out of his body bit by bit. But now that he was entangled by Ling Han, where would he have the time? This was exchanging injury for injury. Ling Han's mind was continuously attacked, and blood seeped out of his 7 apertures, but he attacked endlessly. His fighting spirit soared, and he also created a huge problem for Zhang Tianyan. Sword chi rampaged, and he was also riddled with wounds. The injuries of the two were different, but the destructive power was about the same. It was just who could hold on first. Zhang Tianyan very soon showed the intention to retreat. He was afraid that even if he could kill Ling Han, he would be too heavily injured and die together with Ling Han. He was greedy, but when he reached the height of the 8th heaven, he naturally could control his greed. Gritting his teeth, he turned and ran. He definitely couldn't take down Ling Han by himself. Not to mention that the Empress' battle prowess couldn't be underestimated. Go find a helper and come back to suppress these two people. In any case, there are 2 celestial tools enough to split. Did I say you can leave? How could Ling Han let him escape? Regulations of space spread out, and instantly turn the space into layers like a swamp. If I want to leave, how can you stop me? Zhang Tianyan laughed wildly. If an 8th heaven celestial king wanted to escape wholeheartedly, even a 9th heaven celestial king would find it very difficult to stop him. What more a mere 5th heaven? Not only will I stop you, I'll even kill you. Ling Han used regulations of space on himself, passing through layers of space, and began to pursue Zhang Tianyan. Zhang Tianyan supported himself with regulations. He stood at the height of the 8th heaven, and in terms of regulations alone, he naturally crushed Ling Han. Pung pung pung, he forcibly broke through the spatial barrier, his speed almost unaffected. However, almost did not mean everything. Ling Han's speed was astonishingly fast in the first place. Zhang Tianyan was only slightly hindered, and Ling Han had already caught up. His divine demon sword slashed out unstoppable. Damn it! Zhang Tianyan had no choice but to turn around and continue to exchange blows with Ling Han. They were still exchanging blows, and the two's injuries became more and more serious. One was from the inside to the outside, and the other from the outside to the inside. At this stage, it was actually a contest of willpower. Whoever's willpower was stronger would be able to stand to the end. Peng Ling Han was struck by a punch, and Zhang Tianyan was also struck by the lightning of water and wood. Both of them spat out blood without end. However, in the next instant, the two of them began to exchange blows again. Peng peng peng. The two of them continuously spat out blood, their injuries becoming more and more serious. Zhang Tianyan discovered that his fighting spirit was becoming weaker and weaker. But on the contrary, not only did Ling Han's battle prowess not weaken, but it was instead increasing. This greatly shocked Zhang Tianyan. This kind of guy who became stronger as he recovered was really too hard to deal with, especially in a situation where they were evenly matched. The more you fought, the weaker you became, but the more the other fought, the stronger he became. It was like cheating, so how could he still play? I said I'd kill you. Ling Han's fighting spirit soared to the skies, and the will of martial arts surged unstoppable. Chapter 2637. Ling Han didn't say anything else. Gu Hui wouldn't appear for the time being, so he would wait. Once the celestial fruits ripened, he would definitely appear. And it wouldn't be too late to kill him then. Ling Han and the Empress sat by the lake, inhaling the fragrance of the fruits. There was a sliver of energy of heaven and earth, and it was beneficial even to celestial kings. No wonder so many people still sat here, even though they knew they weren't qualified to fight for the celestial fruits. Most of the celestial kings were affected by the black aura, and all of them had violent tempers. They would attack at the slightest provocation, and battles would occur almost every day. Some battles only resulted in heavy injuries, while others ended with the death of one party. The strongest here were the 13-peak 7th heaven celestial kings. They all had the potential of a monarch tier, and their battle prowess was close to the 8th heaven. Thus, they acted domineeringly and without scruples. Ling Han only had two things in mind now. One was to wait for Gu Hui to appear, and the other was to pluck the celestial fruits. He didn't care about anything else. Thus, he didn't cause any trouble, and just waited patiently with the Empress. However, just because they didn't cause trouble didn't mean that others wouldn't provoke them. In particular, the two of them were only 5th heaven celestial kings, and the Empress was extraordinarily beautiful. She was practically an unguarded treasure, and it was too tempting. After Ling Han showed his might and killed 9 6th heaven celestial kings, no one dared to provoke him anymore. This brat seems to be a bit extraordinary. Ling Han's performance also attracted the attention of the peak 7th heaven celestial kings, and they all looked over. Xiao Qi, go and ask this brat to greet me, a peak 7th heaven celestial king said. Yes. Ling Han sat cross-legged, raised his head slightly, and walked towards the approaching celestial king. After he erected his might, no one dared to get within 30 meters of him. But this celestial king walked over casually. Was he looking for a beating? Sir, my lord summons you, the celestial king said. He was at the 6th heaven. Ling Han didn't deny it, and instead asked, Who's your lord? Pei Shanghai, Lord Pei. The 6th heaven celestial king said proudly. Pei Shanghai was a celestial king, and his battle prowess was close to the 8th heaven. Even here, he could be ranked as an elite. Ling Han shook his head. I don't know any Tom, Dick, or Harry. You, the 6th firmament immortal king, was instantly enraged. How dare he call Pei Shanghai a nobody? He suppressed his anger and said, If Lord Pei is a nobody, then what are you? A cold glint flashed in Ling Han's eyes. He had been sitting here all this time. Who had he offended? In the end, this person had come uninvited and was so arrogant. The moment he opened his mouth, he asked him to pay his respects. What right did he have to give him face? You're courting death, he said coldly. He raised his hand, suppressing his opponent. How dare you? shouted the sixth firmament immortal king sternly. He did not even dare to retaliate. He hurriedly fled. He had seen Ling Han in action, and his battle prowess was too terrifying. How could he dare to face him head-on? However, if he could escape, what right did Ling Han have to kill an eighth firmament immortal king? Bam! When the palm landed, the sixth firmament immortal king was smashed into a bloody pulp. Everyone in the surroundings gasped when they saw this. This person was too ruthless. He killed at the slightest provocation, yet he only asked him to pay a visit to Pei Xinghai. Who was Pei Xinghai? A peak seventh firmament emperor definitely had the right to put on airs. Yet you killed his subordinate without saying a word. You're completely offending Pei Xinghai. Die. You can be arrogant and domineering because those seventh firmament immortal kings didn't attack you, let alone a peak seventh firmament emperor. Moreover, Pei Xinghai is Lord Heyi's personal attendant. Someone revealed an even bigger secret. What? Lord Heyi? Everyone trembled. Although Heyi was also a seventh firmament immortal king, his battle prowess was comparable to a peak eighth firmament immortal king. Otherwise, he would not have been qualified to compete for the immortal fruits. No wonder. So Pei Xinghai is one of the guards Lord Heyi left here to protect the immortal fruits. Lord Heyi is truly extraordinary. He is only a seventh firmament immortal king, but he has a seventh firmament emperor willingly following him. In the future, he will definitely rule a city and become an overlord. Even I want to follow Lord Heyi and hitch a ride, but he doesn't care about me at all. Amidst the sounds of discussion, Pei Xinghai slowly stood up, then strode towards Ling Han, his expression as cold as ice. A mere fifth firmament immortal king actually dared to not give him face? He didn't walk quickly, but every step he took caused a terrifying aura to ripple. It was like a sharp sword pointed at Ling Han. Pei Xinghai was naturally furious that Ling Han dared to kill his subordinate in front of him and everyone. He swore that he would definitely make Ling Han regret it. "How dare you kill my subordinates?" said Pei Xinghai coldly. His voice rumbled like thunder, causing the ears of the people nearby to buzz, and their minds to go blank. This shocked everyone. This was the strength of a peak seventh firmament emperor. It was truly unimaginably powerful. Ling Han said calmly, "Your subordinate provoked me, so I killed him. If you want to follow in his footsteps, feel free to come over. I don't like to cause trouble, but whoever dares to provoke me can only wait to cry." "How dare you?" Pei Xinghai roared angrily. Wang, his voice transformed into a wave that surged towards Ling Han like a tsunami. Xiao Ling Han's figure moved like a sharp sword. He tore through the sound wave and charged towards Pei Xinghai. "You have some strength. No wonder you dare to be so arrogant." Pei Xinghai sneered. He raised his hand and pressed it towards Ling Han. "But in front of me, this is far from enough." Ling Han suddenly accelerated. Pung! Even celestial kings were unable to capture his figure. Everyone only felt their vision blur. And then Ling Han had already appeared in front of Pei Xinghai. He raised his right fist and suddenly smashed it down. Pei Xinghai let out a light snort. He was shocked by Ling Han's speed, but he didn't panic. Being fast didn't mean that his combat prowess was strong. Pung! Ling Han's fist smashed down, and Pei Xinghai raised his arm to block. The great Tao wrapped around his arm, as if there was a layer of indestructible divine light protecting it. He was very confident. Even an ordinary eighth heaven celestial wouldn't be able to shatter his defense with a single strike, let alone a mere fifth heaven celestial king. Pa! The fist smashed down, and that layer of divine light was practically non-existent. It was immediately shattered into pieces. Before Pei Xinghai's expression could change, the fist force exploded, and his right arm was instantly broken. His skin and flesh split open, his bones fractured and blood splattered. But this was not the end. An unstoppable force surged over, and Pei Xinghai also fell to the ground. Pung! There was a loud sound, and his entire body sank into the ground. This strike was earth-shattering. A fifth heaven celestial king actually defeated a peak seventh heaven celestial king with a single strike. This is too unacceptable. How can there be such a monster? A man and a woman, and their strength is incomparably powerful. Could it be? Could it be? They are foreign cultivators. Everyone looked towards Ling Han and the Empress. There was shock and fear, but more than that there was disgust. Ling Han didn't mind. He was only slightly surprised and said, "He's actually not dead yet." Chapter 2638. Pung. A figure flew out from the ground, standing proudly in the sky. Blood-red aura surged around his body, as if he was a great demon god, about to start a massacre and slaughter the world. It was Pei Xinghai. Ling Han was slightly surprised. Under his strike, the peak stage of the seventh heaven, even if it was a monarch tier, actually hadn't been killed. "I've really underestimated you." Pei Xinghai's voice rumbled. Cold light shot out from his eyes, and great Tao symbols could be seen throbbing within them. His killing intent was boiling, and his anger had reached the extreme. That's right. How could Pei Xinghai be killed in one move? The surrounding people all nodded. This was the invincible emperor they knew. Pei Xinghai must have underestimated his opponent. His strength is definitely not limited to this. Ling Han, on the other hand, stared at Pei Xinghai for a while and said, "The protective technique you practice is quite extraordinary. It allowed you to escape." At his level, he naturally knew how much power he needed to use. He would not waste even the slightest bit. However, he did not expect Pei Xinghai to have cultivated a powerful protective technique. That was why he was unable to complete his attack. Pooh. In response, Pei Xinghai immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. He had luckily escaped this calamity, but that didn't mean he didn't have to pay a price. When they saw this scene, the surrounding people were shocked once again. Yes, Ling Han didn't kill Pei Xinghai with a single strike, but he made him vomit blood with a single strike. Wasn't that enough to prove his strength? Heavens, his battle prowess should be at least at the 8th heavenly layer, right? Even if he is at the early stage of the 8th heaven, he has already crossed 3 realms. A 5th layer deity with the power of an 8th layer deity. I'm going crazy. Everyone held their heads, unable to believe what they were seeing. They knew that there were indeed monsters in this world, but this was too monstrous. It was so monstrous that they could not accept it. Pei Xinghai spat out a mouthful of blood, but his spirit, energy, and energy were rising. His eyes shone with a divine light, and his fighting spirit was boiling. He pointed a finger at Ling Han. "You've successfully angered me. Only death awaits you." Ling Han laughed. "Are you here to tease me? Die!" Pei Xinghai charged out. This time, he was no longer careless. A silver spear had already appeared in his hands. Shua, his speed was astonishingly fast. There was only a flash of silver light, and in the next instant, he had already charged in front of Ling Han. This strike stirred up the momentum of the world. It was as if the entire world was suppressing Ling Han. An emperor was an emperor after all. How could his strength be underestimated? Just as the silver spear was about to pierce Ling Han, a spiritual shock was also sent towards him. Ling Han suddenly felt a sharp pain in his sea of consciousness, as if his head was about to explode. Spear of death. Pei Xinghai roared and poured all his strength into his spear, thrusting it towards Ling Han. Under the mental assault, even if Ling Han's sea of consciousness did not explode, it would definitely be affected, causing his reaction to slow down. In a battle of this level, a slight delay in reaction could be fatal. Go to hell. Pei Xinghai laughed coldly. Tears of blood flowed from his eyes, making him look extremely savage. But in the next instant, the smile on his face instantly turned into shock. This was because Ling Han had moved calmly and easily grabbed the spear. He had really missed it by just a little bit, and the tip of the spear had stopped at Ling Han's throat. He pushed with all his might, but the spear seemed to have grown roots and did not move at all. How is this possible? You clearly did not use a spiritual shock. How can you not be affected? Pei Xinghai exclaimed. He really could not accept this. Spiritual shocks could mutually annihilate each other. But Ling Han had clearly not used such an attack. How could he not be affected at all? Ling Han smiled slightly. Who said that I am not affected? He had still felt pain. However, his endurance had greatly increased now, and coupled with his incredibly strong willpower, he had only felt pain for a moment. His battle prowess had not been affected because of this. This was called being affected. Pei Xinghai was speechless, but when he saw that Ling Han's other hand had already formed a fist and was about to attack him, his heart instantly trembled. He hurriedly let go and exerted force in his legs. He desperately retreated. This opponent was too terrifying, and he was not someone he could contend with at all. You attacked me, and you still want to retreat? Ling Han shook his head. His feet floated unhurriedly, but he still stuck closely to Pei Xinghai. It was just that he did not swing his fist. Pei Xinghai's face paled. What kind of monster was this? His strength, speed, and soul all surpassed stage 5 heavens, and he could even suppress him. However, seeing that Ling Han did not attack, he finally relaxed slightly. His opponent should be afraid of Lord He, right? That made sense. What kind of existence was He? He was a peak stage 7 heavens super emperor star, and his evolution index had soared to 12. Who would not fear such a person? As long as Lord He advanced one step further, he would be able to do as he pleased in the Immortal King Cemetery. If he became a stage 9 heavens immortal king, he would be an absolutely invincible existence. At least you know what's good for you. He puffed. Pei Xinghai wanted to say a few words, but he did not expect Ling Han to suddenly send out a punch, smashing his head and instantly shattering his sea of consciousness. Naturally, he died completely. Everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. This person was truly decisive. Pei Xinghai had already revealed his backer, but Ling Han had still attacked without hesitation, not even giving He any face. He is definitely an extraordinary person. This fellow is indeed extraordinary, but it's impossible for a stage 5 heavens super emperor star to rival a peak stage 7 heavens super emperor star. That's right. Even if this fellow's evolution index reached 12, it's impossible for him to make up for the difference of 2 realms. Just wait to be torn to shreds by Lord He's rage. Everyone did not like Ling Han, and they all shook their heads. Even the peak stage 7 heavens experts did not stand out to say anything. In any case, when He arrived, Ling Han would be a corpse. However, how could they know that Ling Han not only had an evolution index of 12, but he had also obtained an invincible body technique? This was his true trump card. Ling Han returned to his original position and sat down cross-legged, patiently waiting for the celestial fruit to ripen. He was determined to obtain this celestial fruit. He only needed 1/5, or even 1/10, and he was confident that he could break through to stage 6. After crossing this threshold, his body technique and the power of regulations would circulate together, and he would be able to rival a stage 9 heavens celestial king. I should only need 5 years at most, he estimated. Even Pei Xinghai had been almost instantly killed, so naturally, no one would dare to provoke Ling Han or covet the empress. They could only keep it in their hearts. Time passed quietly, and Gu Hui did not appear. It seemed that he would not appear until the celestial fruit ripened. Ling Han did not care. Right now, there was only the celestial fruit in his eyes. As long as he could break through to stage 6, no matter who they were, he would suppress them all. Just like that for years past. On this day, the fragrance from the celestial fruit became incredibly rich, and it made people's pores open, making them feel as if they were on cloud 9. A supreme celestial fruit, a supreme great medicine. Ha ha ha. Amidst a long laugh, a green figure flew over from afar. At first he was still a boundless distance away, but in the blink of an eye, he had already appeared above the lake. Everyone was filled with awe and veneration, because there were 8 rays of light entwined around this elder in green. The celestial fruit was about to ripen, and the powerful figures had finally appeared. It was more refreshing to read on a phone. Chapter 2639. I, Fu Yunhai, will be taking this mystic azure flowing wave fruit. Azure-robed immortal king laughed heartily, and reached out to grab the immortal fruit in the center of the lake. Brother Fu, you're too greedy. A voice rang out, but a ray of golden light had already shot over towards Fu Yunhai's hand. Boom. The hand was instantly destroyed, but the golden light was also destroyed. Niu Tsangyu, Fu Yunhai said coldly as he walked in a certain direction. Swish! With a flash of golden light, another 8th firmament immortal king appeared. He was only 3 feet tall, and was a midget, but no one dared to underestimate him. His chi and blood surged like raging dragons, and any one of them could probably suppress a 6th firmament immortal king. This midget was none other than Niu Tsangyu. He looked around, and let out a strange cackle. Diao Yu Shueching Bai Rongwen Lin He, why are all of you hiding? Do you want to reap the benefits without doing anything? Upon hearing his words, 3 figures immediately flew out. All of them were 8th firmament immortal kings with astonishing auras. 8th firmament immortal kings were only 1 step away from the peak of the immortal Tao. However, the last person slowly walked over from the horizon with his hands behind his back. He walked step by step in an extremely carefree manner. But no matter what, he still exuded the aura of posturing. His body was surrounded by 7 brilliant lights, proving that he was only at the 7th firmament, but he was able to stand side by side with an 8th firmament immortal king. He did indeed have the qualifications to show off. He no Guhui. Ling Han's eyes twitched as he stood up. Guhai, Xiaoingxiong, and Miao Hua were the 3 people he wanted to kill the most. Since everyone is here, let's decide who the mystic azure flowing wave fruit belongs to, said Niu Tsangyu. 6 people 1/6 each. How about it? How about it? Gu Hui shook his head. I want half. You. Niu Tsangyu and the other 4 glared at him. This guy wanted half? Didn't that mean they would only get 1/10? All of you have already reached the peak of the 8th firmament. A 10th is enough for you to break through to the 9th firmament, said Gu Hui indifferently. He was only at the peak of the 7th firmament, let alone 1 mystic azure flowing wave fruit. He wouldn't find it too much even if he had 10. What if the first attempt fails? Diao Yu said coldly. Then I still want the other half. You're not worthy. Gu Hui glared at him, his eyes filled with disdain. How dare you? Diao Yu glared at Gu Hui. What, do you want to die? Gu Hui sneered. Hee. We know you're very powerful and a monster, but there are 5 peak 8th stage immortal kings here, said Niu Tsangyu. No one knew what he was thinking. Gu Hui laughed heartily. Even if the 3 of you join hands, you wouldn't be a match for me. But there are 5 of us, said Shueching Bai, tacitly acknowledging Gu Hui's strength. Gu Hui didn't say anything. Instead he took out a sword. Instantly, a cold light shot into the sky, dazzling like a flower. Immortal weapon! Niu Tsangyu and the other 4 immediately wore bitter expressions. Just Gu Hui alone could match 3 peak 8th heaven celestial kings. And if he had an immortal artifact, he wouldn't lose even if he fought against 5 of them. You win. If you want half, then so be it. Niu Tsangyu and the other 4 compromised. If they really fought, they might win, but it would definitely be a Pyrrhic victory. Moreover, if they were struck by the immortal artifact, the consequences would be unimaginable. Gu Hui remained calm. Although he had forced 5 8th heaven celestial kings to bow their heads, he didn't look pleased at all. In his eyes, this was nothing out of the ordinary. He was someone who would become a heavenly venerable in the future. So what if he suppressed a few 8th heaven celestial kings? As expected of Lord He. How impressive! He forced 5 8th heaven celestial kings to bow their heads despite only being at the 7th heaven. This will definitely be passed down through the ages. Everyone was extremely excited. This scene made their blood boil, and they viewed Gu Hui as their idol. The 6 8th heaven celestial kings landed in the center of the lake. Since they had already made their decision, it was time to reap the rewards. Whoosh! At that moment, a sword beam streaked past. It was resplendent and dazzling, causing everyone to involuntarily close their eyes. However, they immediately opened them in shock. That was a sword beam. Wasn't closing their eyes courting death? As the sword beam streaked past, Gu Hui and the other 5 were forced to rise into the air. They didn't dare to continue landing in the center of the lake. A person stood by the lake with a sword in hand. His azure robes fluttered in the wind, making him look like an immortal. It was none other than Ling Han. Is this guy crazy? Lord He hasn't even settled the score with him, but he dares to take the initiative to step forward? Furthermore, he attacked 6 experts at the same time. Does he think he's Lord He? Everyone found it unbelievable. They no longer understood this world. The 6 experts simultaneously moved towards Ling Han. When they saw that Ling Han was only a 5th heaven celestial king, they couldn't help but reveal looks of surprise. This was too exaggerated. Did he eat an immortal dragon bile? Gu Hui laughed loudly. So it's you. I'm here to kill you, Ling Han said indifferently. Should I call you Zhang San or Li Si? Gu Hui said indifferently. Although Ling Han was more monstrous than him, he and Xiaoing Xiong had previously killed him like a rat on the street. Why would Gu Hui take him to heart? I'm Ling Han, said Ling Han. Ha! I don't care what your name is. Since I've found you, you will definitely die today. Gu Hui's face was filled with disdain. However, when he said the last sentence, he revealed intense killing intent. This person was even more monstrous than him. He definitely had a huge secret on him. Gu Hui wanted to kill him to obtain it. However, I don't have the time to deal with you now. You can stay here for now. He extended his hand and made a grabbing motion. The laws of heaven and earth took form, condensing into a person. He injected a sliver of his divine sense, and the figure of laws immediately became plump and lifelike. The figure of laws charged at Ling Han. Boom! It emitted an extremely powerful aura. Even an ordinary 7th heaven celestial king would tremble in fear at the sight of it. Heavens, Lord He is actually this powerful. Just by casually extracting laws and injecting a sliver of his divine sense, he has the combat strength to crush a 7th heaven celestial king. The most talented. The most talented. Everyone was so shocked that their scalps went numb. Even Niu Tsangyu and the others were extremely fearful. This young man was truly too terrifying. If he broke through to the 8th heaven, then even the 5 of them combined would not be a match for him. Sigh. Why did that young man named Ling Han have to seek death? The 2 of them were not even on the same level of strength. Now, Gu Hui still had to collect the immortal fruits. Once he was free, killing Ling Han would only be a matter of a thought. Shua. A sword light flashed past, and the humanoid figure of Laws was slashed into 2. It shook and trembled, wanting to put itself back together again. However, under the impact of the destructive power, it was immediately shattered into countless fragments. An existence that could suppress a 7th heaven celestial king had actually been destroyed with a single strike. Oh my God! Everyone clutched their heads and exclaimed in shock. They could not believe their eyes at all. Ling Han sheathed his sword and said indifferently, I've already said that I'm here to kill you. Chapter 2641. How dare you? Gu Hui and the other 5 roared. Their attacks poured out like a tsunami, and one mental attack after another shot out. Woo! Ling Han gave a muffled humph. At present, the indestructible heaven scroll was more focused on protecting his physical body, and the protection of his spirit was slightly weaker. This caused him to involuntarily spit out a mouthful of blood, and his figure also staggered. But his eyes were bright, and he grabbed at the immortal fruit with determination. Die! Gu Hui slashed out with his sword. Shua, sword chi rampaged. This was a terrifying immortal artifact. Pooh, fresh blood instantly sprayed out from Ling Han's back, but this was still unable to stop his footsteps. With a flick of his left hand, the celestial fruit had already fallen into his hand. Ah! The 6 experts were enraged at the same time. This was a treasure they were determined to obtain, and they had been waiting here for a long time. Ling Han had completely ignited their anger. Boom! Ultimate moves were unleashed one after another, and they all fell toward Ling Han. Originally, Ling Han could circulate the indestructible heaven scroll for about 2 hours, but under the combined attacks of so many elites, the patterns on his body were already beginning to flicker. Fortunately, he didn't have to take the attacks head-on. Xiao, he spread out the regulations of space, and arrived beside the Empress in a single step. He stretched out a hand to grab her, and the Empress was sent into the celestial visitor residence by him. He casually tossed the celestial fruit in, and sent a divine sense to the Empress. Then, he laughed loudly, and turned around to face the 6 furious powerhouses. Hand over the immortal fruits and I can spare your life, said Niu Tsangyu. I only want 1/10 of it. As long as you give it to me, I can leave immediately. Diaoyu took a step back. I also only want 1/10. I'll leave immediately, Rong Wenlin said. The 6 powerhouses expressed their stance one by one. Other than Guhai, each of them only wanted 1/10 of the celestial fruits. This was the same as their previous agreement with Guhai. It was the bottom line that they could accept. As for how Ling Han and Guhai would split the remaining immortal fruits, it was none of their business. Ehe, you guys are thinking too much, Ling Han said faintly. If you scram now, I can still spare your lives. Otherwise, there's no need for you to leave. Just leave your lives here. What a fanatic! There's no limit to his arrogance. Together, the 6 experts were infuriated, and each of them unleashed a powerful attack toward Ling Han. Ling Han focused on dodging. His divine demon sword was indestructible, and he was able to defend himself tenaciously under the attacks of so many elites. If it weren't for the fact that the spiritual attacks were too frightening, he could even have defended himself unscathed. It was impossible for him to escape. The 6 experts had already locked onto him, and had used their great abilities to lock the nearby space. It was impossible for one person to do it, but it was not difficult for the 6 of them to work together. Moreover, Ling Han had no intention of running. Battle, battle, battle. Ling Han slashed the divine demon sword with his right hand, while channeling the 3 lightning technique with his left hand. With the support of the 9 transformations heaven scroll, his attacks were incredibly violent, and in terms of defense, the indestructible heaven scroll was no pushover, either. It helped him repeatedly resolve dangerous situations. One man against 6 great experts, everyone was dumbfounded. They had already overestimated Ling Han, but they discovered that they had still underestimated him. He was so nature-defying that it was completely unreasonable. He can't defend for long, and he'll eventually make a mistake. That will be the time of his death, Guhoi said coldly. His will was firm and unwavering. Agreed. Niao Tsangyu and the others also agreed, and they all increased their attacks. 1 day, 10 days, 1 month. The battle continued. They were all fighting with all their might, and they were determined to kill Ling Han. Ling Han's body was riddled with wounds. After all, they were facing the battle prowess of 6 8th heaven tier elites, and added with the frightening spiritual attacks, it was already extraordinary that he could withstand them. So how could he not be injured? However, Ling Han became stronger and stronger as he recovered. With a battle cry, his fighting spirit was as strong as steel, and his counterattacks were fierce. The divine demon sword shone brightly, and sword chi danced. 3 months, half a year. Ling Han paused slightly, and suddenly began to forcefully break out of the encirclement. Don't even think about it. The 6 elites sneered. They had already sealed off the space, and if Ling Han wanted to break out of it, he would need at least 10 breaths' time, which was enough for them to catch up and kill him. However, Ling Han waved his hand, and an exquisite figure appeared, a powerful but unstable aura radiating from her body. It was the Empress. She waved her hand, and Xiao, Ling Han immediately leaped towards her, his figure rapidly shrinking, and then disappeared. He had entered the immortal indulgence inn. Damn it! The 6 elites all roared. Hand him over or die. They were all extremely domineering, and even Guhoi suppressed his admiration for the Empress. Ling Han had to die, or there would be endless trouble in the future. The Empress was disdainful, and couldn't be bothered to reply. Capture her. The 6 elites all wanted to make a move. They couldn't give Ling Han the chance to recover from his injuries. This kind of person was far too terrifying. Once he recovered, perhaps his battle prowess would rise to a whole new level. The Empress smiled, and her beauty was so cold that even heaven and earth seemed to lose color. However, dark clouds rolled, and a frightening might swept over. Heavenly tribulation. It was the heavenly tribulation. The Empress had already refined a portion of the black-green flowing wave fruit in the celestial visitor residence, causing her cultivation level to improve greatly. Under the acceleration of the flow of time, she had already reached the peak stage of the 5th heaven, and had the qualifications to break through to the 6th heaven first. With the appearance of heavenly tribulation, who still dared to move? Interfering with another's tribulation was one of the greatest disrespect to heaven and earth. and the consequences were incredibly severe. The 6 great celestial kings stopped at the same time. If they moved again, they would be making things difficult for themselves. Gu Hui's eyes flashed. He was a super emperor star, and in a certain sense, didn't fear heavenly tribulation, but the empress was the object of his admiration, and if there was no need, he really didn't want to fight with her. But he only hesitated for a moment, and then strengthened his conviction. Ling Han had definitely gone to refine the celestial fruit, and if he also started to break through to the 6th heaven, then it would be over. Under this premise, so what if she was the empress? Die! Gu Hui leaped out with his sword, and even if the heavenly tribulation had already descended, he still attacked the empress fiercely. How dare you? The empress humphed coldly, and with a shake of her arms, 2 celestial swords appeared in her hands at the same time. When Ling Han had entered into the celestial visitor residence, he had handed the divine demon swords to her. Gu Hui couldn't help but falter. 2 celestial tools. Everyone was also stunned. 2 celestial tools. Shua. Yet the empress didn't hesitate, and slashed out with both swords, sword chi soaring into the skies. The combination of 2 celestial swords was too extraordinary, and added with the fact that the empress was about to break through to the 6th heaven. Her own battle prowess was comparable to the late stage, or even the peak stage of the 7th heaven, and was enough to strike a celestial tool with the might of the 8th heaven. If it was just Gu Hui alone, the empress could block him. Gu Hui roared in fury. At this moment, it was possible that Ling Han had already eaten the celestial fruit. Though he could still refine Ling Han's body and extract the essence within, this naturally felt terrible. He wasn't a man-eating demon. He had to suppress the empress as soon as possible and drag out and kill Ling Han. Otherwise, with every second that passed, Ling Han would refine an additional portion of the essence of the celestial fruit. The empress was unafraid. Though Gu Hui's battle prowess was above hers, he was facing a 7th heaven tribulation. So how much energy could he spare to attack her? At least in this one day's time, she would be able to hold her ground. But when the heavenly tribulation dispersed, the 5 great 8th heaven elites would also join in the siege. At that time, it would really be troublesome. Chapter 2642. The Empress did not fall into a disadvantageous position against Gu Hui. Of course, there was also the heavenly tribulation joining in the fun. Moreover, it was also the main force, causing the 2 prodigies to constantly dodge. Fairy Luan Xing, why are you so infatuated with that brat? Gu Hui saw that he could not win over the Empress, so he changed his strategy and began to poach her away. He is not worthy of you at all. The Empress did not speak. She merely slashed her swords even faster in response. I'll love you 100 times more than that guy, Gu Hui said. Disgusting, the Empress said coldly. Gu Hui took a deep breath. He no longer had any delusions about the Empress. Even if he still wanted to possess the Empress, he would directly suppress her with brute force and directly seize her body. You forced me to do this, he said in a low voice. The immortal artifact in his hand slashed out, and a brilliant light shone out. Ten Fiend's soul-seizing sword. He unleashed his ultimate move. A sword illuminated the sky, seizing souls and taking lives. Wang, a spiritual attack was also unleashed at the same time, charging towards the Empress. The Empress immediately felt that she was in great danger. Heavenly tribulation was already incredibly terrifying, and now she was being attacked by a peak level 7 Emperor star. So she naturally felt immense pressure. This was a disadvantage of multiple realms. The difference was simply too great. The Empress retreated as she fought. Now that the heavenly tribulation was wreaking havoc, the blockade that the 6 elites had set up was naturally useless. There was nothing that could block the heavenly tribulation. From a certain perspective, this had surpassed the regulations. Gu Hui continued to press forward, and there wasn't much time left for him. If he couldn't suppress the Empress as soon as possible, then even if he managed to drag out Ling Han, he would have more or less refined the celestial fruit by then. He wanted to break through to the 8th firmament as soon as possible. Only then would he be able to fight against a 9th firmament immortal king. His attacks became more and more ferocious. Yet the Empress was also incredibly tenacious in her defense. More importantly, he could only use a portion of his power on his attacks. Otherwise, the heavenly tribulation wouldn't care whether it was an imperial star or something else, and would still strike without mercy. The Empress defended tenaciously. Very quickly, a day passed, and the heavenly tribulation dissipated. Fu Yunhai and the others attacked at the same time, surrounding the Empress. This was the battle prowess of a whole 6th heaven elites. Even if the Empress had broken through to 6th heaven, and had the help of 2 celestial tools, she was still no match for them, and was instantly beaten to the point of spitting blood. She didn't even last 10 moves, and the Empress had no choice but to retreat into the immortal indulgence abode. Otherwise, she would be seeking her own death. And this was way too obvious. Hence, all 6 of them had their eyes on the immortal patron's residence at the same time. Even with the support of the heaven-deceiving art, there was nothing they could do. A spatial divine item, Xue Chengbai said disdainfully as he punched out. One immortal gold shone, releasing terrifying ripples, returning the favor to Xue Chengbai. Xue Chengbai's expression couldn't help but change greatly. He hurriedly leaped and dodged the ripple. Immortal metal wouldn't attack on its own, but when it received an attack, it could reflect the damage. This was terrifying. Adding on the destructive power of immortal metal itself, it was something that only the 9th layer of the heavenly layer could withstand. A spatial vessel forged from immortal gold. Seeing this, all the experts cried out in shock. This was too extravagant. The others didn't even have a single celestial tool. Yet they were already using immortal gold to forge a spatial celestial tool. So what? Gu He smirked coldly. This celestial tool was forged by them, and doesn't have the formation patterns set down by a 9th heaven emperor, so it won't be difficult to break through. That's right. Niao Tsangyu and the others all nodded. Come, let's join forces and break through together. The 6 great elites once again joined forces, but this time, they weren't attacking Ling Han or the Empress together. Instead, they were targeting the immortal indulgence abode. They were all greedy. This was forged from immortal gold, and even if they seized it and didn't refine it into a weapon, merely the spatial celestial tool was already incredibly awesome. If they set down supreme formation patterns, even a 9th heaven celestial king wouldn't have to fear it. This was a formation pattern that Ling Han had set down with his cultivation level of the 5th heaven, so it wasn't difficult to break through. Merely half a day later, the 6 great elites revealed a cold smile. It was done. Ling Han died. They were just about to enter when they saw a blur before their eyes, and a figure had already shot out. It was Ling Han, Niao Tsangyu, and the others all took a few steps back. They were far too wary of Ling Han, and they were even more afraid that Ling Han had already refined the celestial fruit, and his strength had risen to a whole new level. Don't be afraid, Gu Hao immediately said, taking the initiative to attack. It's a mere day and a half. It's impossible for him to refine the celestial fruit. Ling Han's right hand shook, and the divine demon sword appeared. Ding ding ding. The 2 great prodigies were once again locked in a fierce battle. Indeed, just as Gu Hao had said, even if Ling Han possessed the constitution of time, a mere day and a half was still not enough for him to refine the celestial fruit, raise his cultivation level to the peak stage of the 5th heaven, and then attempt to break through to the 6th heaven. However, he had no choice but to come out, because the formation of the immortal indulgence abode had already been broken, and the enemy was about to charge in. At that time, not only would he be forced to fight, but he would also put the women in danger. Seeing that Ling Han's strength had not increased by much, Niao Tsangyu and the others all breathed a sigh of relief, and then they all moved to attack. Ling Han fought. Even if he had not broken through, his battle prowess was still higher than the Empress. His fists and sword shot out together, and he began to break out of the encirclement. The formation around him had already been destroyed by the heavenly tribulation. Don't even think about it. Niao Tsangyu and the others hurriedly leaped away and set up a new formation around him. Ling Han sneered. You guys are so determined to seek death, so I'll help you. Death is at hand. Gu Hui continued to tangle with Ling Han, not giving him a chance to escape. After Niu Tsangyu and the others set up the formation, they once again charged over and joined forces with Gu Hui to suppress and kill Ling Han. This brat's qi and blood are soaring, and he himself is a precious medicine. If we refine him, perhaps he can directly break through to the ninth heaven, Diao Yu said, his eyes sweeping over Ling Han's body without any hesitation. What he meant was that he wanted to refine Ling Han alive into medicine, and then eat him. Not bad. With such an astonishing body technique, this is definitely a precious medicine for the human body. Rong Wenlin nodded, and even stuck out his tongue to lick Ling Han's flesh. At their level, there was only one thing in their eyes, and that was to break through to the ninth heaven. Under this premise, they could disregard all rules and principles, and even the morals of the human world. Kill. The attacks of these celestial kings became even more violent. They knew that they could no longer obtain the black flowing wave fruit, but if they refined Ling Han into medicine, the effects would be the same, and perhaps even better. Kill, kill, kill. They stared fixedly at Ling Han. As long as this continued, they would eventually kill Ling Han. Ling Han, on the other hand, was silent for once. He simply waved his sword, and didn't say a single word. Just a stubborn resistance. Gu Hui sneered. Although it was impossible to see the dawn of victory in a short period of time, he believed that this day would not be too far away. Whether it was 10 days, a month, or even half a year, or even 100 years, he would persist until he personally killed Ling Han. Time passed quickly, and Ling Han's situation became more and more dire. The combined might of the 6 great experts was too terrifying. And in addition to the fact that all of them could use mental attacks, Ling Han was riddled with scars. The indestructible true fluid was no longer sufficient to heal his injuries. His injuries were truly too severe, causing his combat ability to plummet to rock bottom. Put in a bit more effort, he won't be able to hold on for much longer. Fu Yinhai shouted, "Kill!" The eyes of the 6 great experts all turned red. At this moment, an incomparably powerful aura erupted from Ling Han's body. It was like a tsunami, and it caused the 6 great experts to involuntarily tremble. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.